Chapter 76. 5 days later, Visitor Research Center. Lin Zheng was called here by Lu Qiushan. After the last war incident, Lu Qiushan provided an incident report to the Prism Bureau and believed that Lin Zheng should join the Prism Bureau. It's not about containment, but about joining the Prism Bureau. A new subgroup, the Visitor Abuse Incident Response Group, will be set up under the existing Special Visitor Response Group. The enemy that this countermeasures team has to deal with is war. Get rid of him. That guy must be eliminated. I won't be able to sleep or eat well as long as the war continues. Lin Zheng said firmly. Yes, he must be eliminated, so I wrote an application early the next morning and submitted it to the Prism Bureau headquarters. The result was as expected, said Lu Qiushan. They agreed. They rejected it and accused me of being inconsiderate and immature. Lin Zheng was speechless for a while. Ahem, of course it's not that my words are useless. Our Prism Bureau also takes this matter very seriously. They just think that my strategy has problems. They are willing to help investigate the mysterious organization you mentioned, but they feel that they cannot rely on you to deal with the abuse of visitors. But I think they look at the problem from a very one-sided perspective. They don't see it from such a macro perspective as I do. Lu Qiushan turned his head and looked at him and said, because I know that as long as I believe in you, good things will happen. Lin Zheng sighed and said, so the Prism Bureau. The boss wants to meet you face to face. He asked me to bring you to the headquarters. Lin Zheng stopped and said, then I still have to buy a plane ticket to the capital. Tisk, kid, who told you that the Prism Bureau is in the capital? Do you understand the value of the Prism Bureau? Lu Qiushan grabbed Lin Zheng's arm with his fat hands and led him through the intricate corridors of the Visitor Research Center. After swiping his identity verification card 3 different times, he pulled Lin Zheng into a corridor marked as a restricted area. The corridor was dimly lit, with only a hint of red light flickering like breathing, giving off a warning. The corridor is long, but there is only one door on the left wall. This door doesn't look like a door that should appear in an office. It looks more like a vermilion door in a classical scenic spot. Gorgeous and retro, with an old-fashioned feel. Lu Qiushan placed his hand on the door and slowly applied force, and the heavy door creaked open slowly. Bright sunshine, cool water vapor, and even a breeze instantly poured out of the room and poured into the narrow corridor. It's not a door to enter, but a door to exit. This door leads to... Lin Zheng saw a vast and boundless lake. The clear sky was reflected on the huge lake, so bright that it made people unable to open their eyes. On the lakeside, a huge ancient building stands tall. It is a 3-story building with a helmet-shaped roof. The vermilion wooden structure is covered with glazed yellow tiles, which looks solemn and magnificent. More importantly, the moment Lin Zheng saw this place, he vaguely recognized it. Lu Qiushan opened his arms, his face full of exaggerated pride and said, Lin Zheng, welcome to one of the most awesome shelters in the world, the headquarters of the Prism Bureau, and the last pure land of mankind, Yueyang Tower. That's right, Yueyang Tower. This huge building is exactly the same as Lin Zheng remembered. But it is much taller, far taller than the other buildings around it, and it looks imposing and extremely new. Standing on the shore of the vast lake, it is like a giant armed with sharp weapons. S003, Yueyang Tower. Lu Qiushan said slowly, the only material world that has been confirmed to be free of abnormalities. Item No, S003 Project Name, Yueyang Tower, an independent material world discovered and confirmed by the Prism Bureau in 20XX. The area includes a lake called Dongting Lake, which is a huge freshwater lake of 3,998 square kilometers. An ancient building called Yueyang Tower is 194.2 meters high. It has 3 floors, 4 pillars, flying eaves, a helmet-shaped roof, and a pure wooden structure. The proportions of the building do not conform to the structure of conventional human buildings and are believed to be the result of 10 times magnification. In addition, it contains a small portion of normal-sized urban areas that do not possess anomalous properties. The spatial boundary is manifested as a circular boundary, that is, when crossing the boundary, you will appear at the other end of the boundary. Crossing the boundary is accompanied by certain dangers, including the risk of falling into the lake and the risk of limb amputation, and is not recommended as a mode of transportation. Unusual characteristics: the origin and history of Yueyang Tower are unknown, and its anomalous properties vary. Abnormal characteristic 1, all physical abnormal objects that enter the Yueyang Tower area will be harmlessly transformed into normal objects, and abnormal characteristics will reappear when they leave. Based on this characteristic, some scholars have proposed the hypothesis that the Yueyang Tower area is the last real world. However, there is currently no valid evidence for this hypothesis. Furthermore, the Yueyang Tower area does have unusual properties, with limited resources and space, and cannot accommodate long-term human development. Note: Dongting Lake is currently used to contain various physical anomalies by immersion. Abnormal characteristic 2, it is difficult to give an exact description, pointing to the keyword prosperity. There is an inscribed stone tablet over 5 meters high on the second floor of Yueyang Tower. The content on the stone tablet is an essay written by an unknown writer, Yueyang Tower Inscription, which mentions the 2 states of Yueyang Tower. When the microclimate cycle in the area is stable as described in the article, in spring, the weather is bright and the waves are calm. The sky is blue and boundless. Seagulls fly and fish swim. The shore is covered with lush green grass and orchids. If it points to a prosperous state, it indicates that Dongzhou will have political stability and people's harmony, and all things will be revived, the rate of anomaly spread in Dongzhou will be reduced to a certain extent, and the possibility of breakthroughs in anomaly research will increase. When the microcirculation climate in the region turns to the following: when the rain is heavy and the moon does not come out, the wind is howling, the waves are rolling, the sun and stars are hidden, and the mountains are hidden. This indicates the following situations. There are 45 situations in total, including war, plague, devastating anomalous invasion, spread of harmful memes, malicious reality distortion, large-scale death without signs, and decisive death of personnel. For details, please see Appendix 1, Details of the impact of the incident on Yueyang Tower. When climate change occurs in the region, the PRISM Bureau should immediately take measures based on the type and severity of the climate change. This includes taking tracing measures, security measures, contacting key personnel, suppressing anomalies, and launching armed suppression against illegal supernatural organizations and individuals. Lin Zheng sat in the lobby of the PRISM Bureau's office building, holding a thick stack of information in his hands and looking up at the wall. There is a huge hanging painting on the wall, with the rubbing of Fans Hongguyan's Yueyang Tower inscription on it, and an electronic calendar below it. Yueyang Tower climate status, stable. Duration, 737 days. I ask every colleague to keep up the good work. It really is. Yueyang Tower. Lin Zheng muttered to himself. Chapter 77. There are many more staff members in the PRISM Bureau than Lin Zheng expected. The whole city is bustling with people and traffic, and it looks like a city with a complete social structure. Sometimes there is even a traffic jam. So in order not to be late for work, some staff members violated the ban and dived into the space boundary to teleport to the other side. In addition to Dongzhou people, there are many foreign faces in the urban area. There were several faces among them that Lin Zheng was familiar with, as they seemed to have appeared in some very awesome magazines. There weren't so many foreigners in the past, and they were all joint research projects. But now many countries come to learn about visitors, and we are the authority and the leader. Liu Qiushan sat next to Lin Zheng carelessly. He continued to ramble on. Do you know why Dongzhou is able to take the lead in abnormal research and why teleportation technology is advancing the fastest in Dongzhou? It's because of this place, the Yueyang Tower. He looked at the towering Yueyang Tower through the glass door of the hall and said, do you know? Many countries want to carry out projects in Dongzhou, and as long as the projects are valuable, we will approve them. Is this considered sharing the country's destiny? Lin Zheng asked. It can be said that if Dongzhou prospers, the world will prosper. After all, everyone is living a hard life now. If something happens to one of our neighbors, we might all be doomed. Dongzhou is at least the big brother in this community of shared destiny. As the two were talking, a middle-aged man in a white coat and with soft curly hair came over. Come, let me introduce you. This person is the person in charge of the Accommodation Affairs Department of Yueyang Tower, Liang Quebec. Liu Qiushan stood up. Another guy who looks ordinary but always has something wrong. His name is actually quite subtle if you think about it carefully. I thought you would call Fujikokyo something. Lin Zheng said with a smile. Liang Ke shrugged and said, Yueyang Tower doesn't necessarily need Fujikokyo. We in the PRISM Bureau don't have prism tanks either. The office buildings of most departments of the PRISM Bureau are directly renovated from existing buildings in the urban area. But Liang Q's office was different. His office was underground, or to be exact, underwater. Only one wall is close to the deep lake shore, and the remaining 3 walls are all glass and metal frames, extending into the deep water. Through the glass, Lin Zheng could see clearly the scene under Dongting Lake. In the deep lake, dense iron chains extend from the surface of the lake, tied to glass boxes of various sizes. The glass boxes are illuminated with lights, floating in the lake in scattered patterns, like countless lanterns in the night, extending to places that are invisible to the eye. Underwater searchlights sweep over these lanterns and offices, bringing a brief moment of light before disappearing again. With the brief light, Lin Zheng was able to see countless abnormal things. Natural objects, human tools, strange creatures, sculptures, so numerous and dense that Lin Zheng felt his scalp tingling. Liu Qiushan told me about you. Liang Ke, who was sitting opposite the desk, interrupted Lin Zheng's thoughts. Your actions in Jianglan City are admirable. All right, forget about the pleasantries. Liu Qiushan said as he placed the thermos cup on the table. He said, come on, tell me, why don't you agree with my plan? Do you distrust my character or my ability? Liang Ke lowered his head slightly and said, I trust everything, but as I said, it's not well thought out and immature. Well, tell me about it. Liang Ke smiled and said, you said that as long as we make sure that Lin Zheng is the strongest person directly involved, we can prevent the visitor's power from being abused. But how can we make him the strongest? Besides, the strongest is an unstable state in itself. What if a stronger person directly affected appears in the future? Finally, have you ever thought that this responsibility is too heavy for Mr. Lin Zheng? He raised his eyes to Lin Zheng and said, Mr. Lin Zheng is currently facing the threat of war. He may be willing to take on this responsibility, but what if we deal with the war? For a moment, Liu Qiushan was speechless. It seemed that he really had not considered it. After a while, he said, but judging from the trend, this is the best choice. His tone and accent already sounded a bit rogue. That's because we have different perspectives. Liang Ke sighed softly. Of course, we all view the power of the visitors as an extremely important resource, one that is beneficial to human survival, but also has the potential to be abused. Yes, it's like this all over the world. They are just like little sluts, eager to be looked at by visitors. Liu Qiushan said. The muscles on Lin Zheng's face twitched slightly, and Liang Ke couldn't help but be amused. He curved his eyes slightly and said, yes, your idea now is to try your best to show off your charm and adapt to him as much as possible. But I think differently. Liang Ke paused and said, I want to bring the visitor in and then contain it. The office suddenly fell into a long silence. A huge underwater searchlight swept across the office, illuminating Liang Ke's face, which looked young compared to his age. Liang Ke, are you serious? Liu Qiushan swallowed his saliva and raised 3 fingers. 3s, 3ss, do you know what this means? This is the most outrageous and unsolvable one. That's why it's worth a try. If we can succeed, it will mean a lot to the whole world, Liang Ke said with a smile. Lin Zheng was suddenly at a loss. What are you going to do? It's very simple. Liang Ke said, do you know what is the difference between visitor and other 3s? Lin Zheng shook his head. It is the only class 3's anomaly with a physical body. Liang Ke continued, the main feature of Yueyang Tower is that it can neutralize the features of any abnormal entity. This means that as long as we can bring the visitors to the Yueyang Tower area, we will be able to accommodate them. Liang Ke raised his head and looked at Lin Zheng with his iron-grey eyes. Mr. Lin Zheng, you happen to have the ability to summon visitors through the extraordinary power of the 2 dimensions. To be precise, you will overlap at that time, right? Yes, this is the case with any direct interventionist's 2-dimensional mechanism. That's great. Liang Ke's eyes were as calm as water. With your help, maybe we can complete the first effective containment of 3's anomalies in human history. Chapter 78. This guy Liang Ke seems to be a lunatic who dares to think of anything. But it is obvious that his plan was not a whim. He had a complete plan with a timeline, personnel allocation, and equipment demand plans. So you really plan to use the S-class to contain the 3s? These 2 things are completely not on the same level, right? Lin Zheng couldn't help but ask as he looked at the plan in his hand. Liang Ke stood in front of the glass curtain wall, silently looking at the lanterns that spread beyond his sight. He was silent for a while before he spoke. I was the first person to discover and observe Yueyang Tower. I was also the one who led the entire space penetration of Yueyang Tower. I also proposed the Dongting Lake immersion plan. I know Yueyang Tower. This project is like my child. I know its potential is unfathomable, and it has never let me down. The reason why it is classified as S-level is that the threes either does not exist in entity or the entity cannot be tracked and guided. But the visitors are different. Although they are powerful, they are physical and can be summoned. This is our opportunity. Then your child really had an unhappy childhood. Liu Qiushan took a deep puff of his cigarette and said, I still can't agree with this. Yueyang Tower is our largest shelter. If something goes wrong, the consequences will be serious. It is also our strongest weapon. If we don't use it because we are afraid that the weapon will break, then the weapon will lose its value. Liang Ke replied. He went on to say, and that is the visitor, the core of the bidimensional extraordinary, a ghost above the anomaly. How many scientists and scholars in the world are eager to take a look, touch, contact, and study him? Don't you want to? Of course I want to too. Liu Qiushan said without hesitation. Lin Zheng suddenly felt a chill all over his body. Are there so many old men and women in the world who want to touch themselves? Even Liu Qiushan wants it. He felt that he couldn't accept it. In short, if we can really capture this powerful ghost through this method and gain knowledge from him, it will definitely be enough to change the current survival status of mankind, so why don't we give it a try? Liang Ke continued. Liu Qiushan seemed to be somewhat convinced. He extinguished the cigarette butt in the ashtray somewhat angrily, leaned back on the sofa and let out a long breath. But won't the rectification agreement object? Lin Zheng asked as the two looked at each other in silence. The rectification agreement will not object. The ban they proposed is to prohibit communication and prohibit penetration. We have not done either of these two things. They may express dissatisfaction, but they cannot cross the red line they set to punish us. Liang Ke replied. They are the order and justice of the world, the laws that bind the entire world. If they themselves were flexible, they would lose their effectiveness. What about the safety issue? This time it was Liu Qiushan who raised the question. As for safety, this is Lin Zheng's first time here, so it's not easy to explain. I'd better just take you to see it directly. The Prism Bureau is the strongest and most mysterious detention agency in the entire East continent. In the past, Lin Zheng would never have believed that the core unit of such a shelter would actually be a meteorological center. I would never have thought that weather would be related to the direction of a country's destiny. But that's what Yueyang Tower is like. The meteorological center is right next to the office building of the shelter center. It is a huge silver-white egg-shaped building with dazzling lights and bustling voices. Everyone who works here is running around. The most central area of the building is home to two huge floor-to-ceiling displays. A display shows weather cloud maps, air moisture content data, wind speed data, wind direction, Dongting lake tide conditions, etc. Another display shows the likelihood of all scenarios occurring. War, 0%. Plague, 12% destructive anomaly invasion, 2% hazardous mimetic spread, 7%. These data are constantly jumping every moment, but the jump of each data is very small. Liang Ke stood in front of the huge display with his hands folded across his chest, looking up at the data that kept flowing on it. There was even a hint of pride in his tone. This is our weather monitoring system. It is very accurate and can also correlate weather conditions with event situations and predict the probability of an event occurring. Will the climate of Yueyang Tower also change due to internal events? Lin Zheng asked. Yes, and it is much more sensitive than detecting external events. You can understand it as a kind of prediction. We can ensure the safety of Yueyang Tower through prediction. Liang Ke replied. Lin Zheng looked at the two huge display screens, and couldn't help feeling a little shocked. This should be the first time he saw humans truly deeply apply abnormal things. He didn't even expect that humans' research on controllable anomalies had developed to this point. Then the next question is the last one. Liang Ke turned to Lin Zheng with a serious expression on his face. Mr. Lin Zheng, we want to get your help. In return, we will do our best to assist you in investigating the mysterious organization. Lin Zheng looked at Liang Ke's serious expression and couldn't help but feel a headache. This matter really always develops in an unexpected direction. He originally wanted to use the pressure brought by the war to join the Prism Bureau. After all, the Prism Bureau's knowledge and intelligence gathering capabilities are much stronger than his alone, so it would be much easier to investigate the Night of Eternal Tranquility or to search for the fourth definition. But God knows what happened. The situation suddenly turned out that I had to assist the Prism Bureau in sheltering me. But what if? What if the Prism Bureau really rescued me from the eternal night? Well, it's impossible, there is no possibility at all. The level of technology mastered by young Ning yet is completely not on the same level as humans. And even if we take a step back, after being rescued, he was still touched all over by a bunch of old men and women, which he actually found quite difficult to accept. Sigh, okay. Lin Zheng sighed softly and said, since there won't be any danger, it doesn't matter if I help you, but there is one thing I want to explain in advance. Just tell me what's going on. Liang Ke immediately expressed his opinion. Just because I can summon it doesn't mean I can control it. The power of the visitor is an out-of-control force. If I lead it directly to Yueyang Tower, I will not be responsible if there are any unexpected consequences. Liang Ke smiled and said, don't worry, Yueyang Tower is not that fragile. Any abnormality will be ineffective as long as it enters the interior of Yueyang Tower. As long as it is a physical entity, this is the basic law of Yueyang Tower. Chapter 79. Yueyang Tower has entered the formal preparation stage for receiving visitors. Not everyone knows about this, nor does everyone need to know about it. During the 7 days of preparation, Liang Ke, in the name of the head of the accommodation department, sent most of the non-internal and non-essential personnel to the office in the main material world. Only the most streamlined and relevant departments were left in the Yueyang Tower area. It includes multiple departments such as reality distortion research, mental expansion research, anthropology research, and life preservation. However, although they have streamlined the staff as much as possible, there are still more than 1,000 staff members left. Some people thought that their attempt was equivalent to putting lightning in a glass bottle, but when it came down to it, they still put in their best efforts. Lin Zheng stood on the top floor of the shelter. On one side was the vast Dongting Lake and the majestic Yueyang Tower, and on the other side was a convoy traveling through the city. In just 7 days, the ordinary urban area has been transformed into a science fiction city. Huge obelisk-like instruments full of technology are scattered throughout the city, as well as silver-white cannons and satellite dishes that are taller than the buildings. Liang Ke told him that these were observation devices of various types, which would help them determine the absolute position of the visitor after the visitor arrived, thereby ensuring that the visitor was in a physical state. Then Lin Zheng started thinking. Maybe these seemingly unreliable guys can actually succeed? What if they actually succeed? After thinking about it, Lin Zheng suddenly felt that this seemed to be a good thing for him. From a rational point of view, being touched by old men and women in Yueyang Tower is better than facing the mysterious moon that keeps yelling that it wants to kill you on the night of Young Ning. Moreover, there are mountains and water here, and there is a supermarket downstairs. Not only is the transportation convenient, but there are also famous scenic spots. It is much more livable than Young Ning Night. The weather has been good in recent days. It looks like we have a good chance of success. Liang Ke, dressed in a white coat, came up from behind him, stirring the coffee gently. Any explanation? Lin Zheng asked. I told you that Yueyang Tower's response to internal changes is very accurate, even so accurate that it is equivalent to having a certain degree of predictive ability. Liang Ke said after taking a sip of coffee. I think Yueyang Tower knows what we are going to do. The fact that it didn't issue a warning means we will succeed. Lin Zheng took a deep breath, turned to look at Liang Ke and said, I have always wanted to ask you a question. Liang Ke's expression turned serious. He nodded and said, ask me whatever you want. I can answer you as long as it's not a confidential question. Are there hairy crabs in Dongting Lake? No, nothing. Hiss, this shouldn't be the case. The water is so good. Anyway, no. The muscles on Liang Ke's face twitched, and he sighed with a hint of resentment. Anyway, it will start tomorrow. Are you ready? Of course I'm ready. Lin Zheng looked at the endless lake, then are you ready? The guy you want me to summon is very strong, probably much stronger than you think. Don't worry, I have a feeling we will succeed. The next day, Dongting Lake was still calm and the sunlight shone on the bright yellow tiles of Yueyang Tower, making it a little dazzling. The city area which was usually bustling with people was now deserted, with only huge super-technical machines standing there. The whole city was echoing with some kind of regular signal sound, which meant that these cannon-like machines were on standby, waiting for their prey to appear. At 12:12 noon, the first human containment attempt against the visitor entered the final preparation stage, and the location was in the square in the center of the city. The 75 members of the containment department were conducting the final debugging of the core equipment here. The equipment that Lin Zheng couldn't name occupied almost half of the square, with huge cables and pipes crisscrossing. The core of this mechanical array is a huge metal ring, which Liang Ke called a target. Lin Zheng will call the visitor in the target, and the precise directional observation will begin the moment the visitor appears. Liang Ke was in charge of the command. Liu Qiushan was the only spectator without any mission, but he still insisted on staying. Lin Zheng did not have any equipment on him, only a life-saving system and a pair of headphones. Liang Ke continued to give orders through the headset. I'll reiterate one last time, this is just an attempt. When any negative changes occur in the weather at Yueyang Tower, it must be stopped immediately. When position 0 Lin Zheng is harmed in any way, it must stop immediately. Is position 0 ready? Okay. Lin Zheng nodded and stood in the center of the circle. Don't be nervous, follow the plan step by step. Even if an accident happens, nothing will happen. Your life safety always comes first. This time it was Liu Qiushan who spoke. But in fact, Lin Zheng was not nervous at all, he was even vaguely looking forward to it. The main program has been started. Observation position number 1, ready. Observation position number 2, ready. Observation position number 3, ready. Wind force level 1, wind speed 0.5, air humidity 35%. The weather in Dongting Lake has not fluctuated significantly and is tending to be stable. It points to the keyword, prosperity, which meets the prerequisites for carrying out the containment plan. Okay, Lin Zheng, we can start now. Liang Ke said. Lin Zheng slowly closed his eyes, his heartbeat began to slow down, and his body temperature dropped. However, he had already informed Liang Ke of these conditions, so they did not trigger the alarm of the life preservation system. His body began to rise slowly. At the same time, the huge ring vibrated violently, and then suddenly stood up, flipping rapidly and irregularly around Lin Zheng's body, forming a huge and illusory sphere. When Lin Zheng opened his eyes again, the whole city suddenly fell into an indescribable subtle atmosphere. Everyone heard, saw, or felt. That extremely powerful SSS-level anomaly has arrived. Will it work? Lin Zheng wondered. Then, all observation equipment in the city launched bombardment on the visitor, completely synchronized, completely at the same time, without any error. In an instant the visitor was pierced by the bombardment, his absolute position was captured, his reality-distorting abilities were deconstructed, and his morphological and energy characteristics were all revealed. At the same time, the meteorological hall monitored that the weather conditions at Yueyang Tower had turned extremely good, and the probability of all possible disaster situations occurring was reduced to 0%. In the sky, Lin Zheng, who was in a dual-dimensional state, suddenly felt his brain dazed, and his body suddenly lost control and fell. At the moment he fell, he saw his original body floating in the air. Is he really stripped? At 12:18 noon, the SSS-level anomaly and the visitor were contained. However, for Yueyang Tower, this seemed to be a trivial matter and it did not even cause a stir. Chapter 80. Half an hour later, Lin Zheng was sitting in a chair wrapped in a thick blanket, with a dozen doctors and nurses circling around him. Measure blood pressure, check heart rate, test his mental state and various physiological reactions. Next to them was a noisy crowd. All the people involved in the operation gathered here at this moment, watching the technicians use instruments to seal the visitor's body into a special containment unit, and then the whole scene erupted in loud cheers. But at this moment, Lin Zheng felt a little confused. Is that it? My original body was just pulled out of the eternal night in a bang? Is it really that simple? Is the seemingly awesome organization of eternal night only this level? Fortunately, I was worried that they might exterminate humanity. Judging from the current situation, if I ask them to attack Ping'an County, I'm afraid most of them will be killed? Just when his mind was full of confusion, Liang Ke and Liu Qiushan came over excitedly. Lin Zheng, how is your health? Liang Ke asked with a smile, can you attend the celebration banquet tonight? Lin Zheng moved his shoulders slightly and said, there shouldn't be any problem attending the celebration banquet, but is this really a success? What else? Liang Ke asked, I told you before that Yueyang Tower can neutralize any entity that enters it. Even if it is SSS level, it still has to follow this logic. So what are you going to do next? Dissection or something? Liang Ke shook his head, we will not take destructive measures, because it is very important to ensure the effectiveness of the visitor's abnormal characteristics. The next step is to study how to produce direct recipients and bidimensional extraordinary people, and truly master the power of the visitor. Just then, a correspondent came running over and said, "Mr. Liang, a letter to rectify the agreement." Liang Ke and Lu Qiushan both looked unsurprised and even took it for granted. They knew from the beginning that the Suhan agreement would intervene after the matter was over. What did they say? If it's criticism or warning, don't read it. Don't ruin my mood. Liang Ke even waved his hands impatiently. It's not a warning letter, it's a congratulatory letter, the correspondent said. They congratulated us on completing the first feat in human history and believed that this is very important for human development. Although Liang Ke wanted to appear nonchalant, at this moment his mouth was almost grinning from ear to ear, and he looked like a happy hippopotamus. Has the situation been reported to the capital? Hippo asked again. We have sent a letter to the capital, and they responded by saying they will reply as soon as possible, said the correspondent. Hippo looked even happier. He turned to ask Lin Zheng, what should Mr. Lin Zheng do next? Take a break and attend the celebration banquet. I may have to go back first. I have a girl at home. I have to bring her with me to the celebration party. Lin Zheng said, rubbing his confused head. Come on, I'll go with you to pick up Xiaobai. You can't drive in this condition. Lu Qiushan said as he helped Lin Zheng up from the chair. He found a random car on the side of the road and drove Lin Zheng towards the entrance they came in. The journey was not long, but Lu Qiushan kept chattering along the way. Lin Zheng still hadn't recovered from the shock. He had an inexplicable sense of unreality. Are the visitors really contained? If the visitor himself were to judge, his answer would be yes. Because he experienced the entire incident completely, he guided the visitor's power into the Yueyang Tower, was then observed, and then was neutralized by the power of the Yueyang Tower. He fell from the air and the life preservation device was activated. What happened has already happened and that will not change. And although they are still being detained, they have escaped the eternal night, which is a good thing. But what exactly is wrong? The car slowly stopped by the roadside. The sun was shining brightly on the slightly empty road. The trees on both sides of the road swayed gently in the breeze, and the huge Dongting Lake was sparkling. Lu Qiushan got out of the car, stretched his body and said, "Ah, today is really the most perfect day. I wish I could be so successful in dealing with endless destruction someday." He knocked on Lin Zheng's car window and said, "Get out of the car by yourself. I'll go open the door first." After saying that, he ran with his belly sticking out towards the vermilion wooden door that he had come through, looking a little funny. Lin Zheng sat in his seat, closed his eyes and took a deep breath silently. "Forget it, let's not think about it for now. Maybe I'm just overthinking it," he said silently in his heart. He took a deep breath, suppressed the strange feeling of incongruity, and got out of the car. But then he found that Lu Qiushan's condition seemed to be a little abnormal. He opened the door, but stood by the door motionlessly. What's wrong? Is there any problem? He walked up to Lu Qiushan, but then he also froze in place. Lin Zheng was very sure that this vermilion double-panel door was the spatial passage through which they entered Yueyang Tower. But now, outside was not the dim corridor of the Visitor Research Center, but an endless dark void. A tiny stone was kicked down by Lin Zheng, and without any sound or echo, it disappeared silently into the darkness. Lu Qiushan's cell phone rang, he picked up the call, and Lin Zheng heard Liang Q's voice on the other end of the line. "Have you reached the door?" Liang Ke asked. "We're here." Lu Qiushan answered dazedly. "Is it abnormal?" "Yes. I just received the intelligence as well. We have found that 6 gates have experienced abnormalities so far. If I am not mistaken, I am afraid that all gates have been affected. Is it related to the visitor?" Liang Ke did not answer immediately. He was silent for a while and said, "Bring Lin Zheng back immediately and be careful on the road. I have a feeling that the current Yueyang Tower is no longer the Yueyang Tower we know. It's becoming very dangerous." Lu Qiushan hung up the phone and looked back blankly into the distance. The Yueyang Tower was still full of spring scenery, but for some reason, he suddenly felt a little uneasy at this moment. Lin Zheng suddenly realized that he, as a visitor, didn't even know what was going on. And for some unknown reason, he was also a little scared. Chapter 81. Yueyang Tower Meteorological Center, Main Conference Hall. This large conference room, which could originally accommodate 300 people, was now crammed with nearly 500 people. Many people were standing or squeezed into the corners, stretching their necks and looking towards the host's seat with difficulty. But even though there were so many people, there was no sound in the conference room, and everyone was waiting for news in silence. Gate 14 has sent a message. The communicator's voice came through the radio. Anomaly has been confirmed, and the anomaly type is nothingness. Gate number 14 is the last gate in the inspection sequence. The locking of this door means that Yueyang Tower has been completely closed. The lights flickered, and an unknown anxiety spread in the room. If it is a space blockade, can we abandon the current doors and use space penetration technology to create a new door? A scholar looked at the head of the Space Penetration Research Institute. The burly-looking person in charge said, "We were already doing this an hour ago, but unfortunately, this is probably not realistic. We did not detect any abnormal increase in the density of the space barrier, which means that there is no penetration node. Please explain it more simply." Liang Ke pinched his nose bridge with one hand, his expression full of fatigue. The person in charge took a deep breath and said, "If we want to penetrate the space, at least we need to know where to penetrate. Generally speaking, the pierceable space is tangent to the main material world, just like two circles, and the tangent point is the penetration node. The node usually appears to increase density or thicken at the spatial level. But the current situation is that Yueyang Tower is not tangent to any other material world. Even the density and thickness of the door we pierced through have returned to normal. To use a more popular example, our situation is not a space blockade, and it's not that someone has blocked the door with bricks and mud. Instead, we have been thrown into the deep sea. No matter which direction we penetrate from, we cannot return to the main material world. Where does that lead to? Nothingness." The conference room fell into silence again. "There is another abnormal phenomenon." The head of the meteorological center looked at the tablet in his hand. His finger slid across the screen, and the data was projected on the big screen. War, 0% plague, 0% destructive anomaly invasion, 0% hazardous mimetic spread, 0% the forecast data for all scenarios are all 0%. They no longer jump but appear to be absolutely still. In principle, whether we are blocked or thrown into nothingness, no matter what state we are in, it will not affect Yueyang Tower's response to the state of the main material world, but now all the data is not moving. Has the system self-check been done? The self-check did not report any issues and the system is operating normally. So what do you think this situation means now? The head of the meteorological center was silent for a while, then he forced an ugly smile and said, "I think, the world is destroyed, and the void at the door is the corpse of the main material world." It sounds like an absurd idea, but no one at the scene laughed, everyone was silent. "I think it's impossible. The probability is too small. How is it possible that the world is destroyed just when we have taken in the visitors?" someone objected. "After the containment was completed, we contacted the capital, and the capital did not report any abnormal conditions." "Lin Zheng, tell me what you think." Liang Ke turned his gaze to Lin Zheng, and the others also looked over. Liang Ke asked, "Do you think this matter has something to do with the visitor?" "In all likelihood, I am certain that the visitor's power is at work, but I don't know what is happening now." Lin Zheng was telling the truth. He was sure that he had summoned the visitor, and then the visitor was contained. And then, if we can find a way to allow you to use the power of the visitors, do you have the ability to reverse or cancel this influence? A scholar asked quickly. Lin Zheng shook his head and said, "You've missed the point. What's affecting Yueyang Tower now is not the power of the visitors, but the results of the visitors' power." To put it simply, Lin Zheng pointed to his head, when a person is shot, it's not the bullet itself that kills him, but the physiological damage caused by the bullet that leads to death. The problem now is that the bullet has hit him, but we don't know where the injury is. Then how can I cancel it if there's no wound? Say let everything be alright or let everyone be happy like a fairy. Who knows if something more terrible will happen if I do that? What if we force it without considering logic? Then I can only make sure I survive alone." Lin Zheng replied. There was dead silence again. At this moment, Lu Qiushan, who had been looking at the table with his hands on his head, suddenly raised his head. There was a hint of blood in his eyes, and his Adam's apple rolled up and down before he said, "Do you have a feeling? Today is really the most perfect day in our lives." His voice was no longer as frivolous as usual, but was deep and a little hoarse. When he spoke, everyone looked at him. "Don't you think so? The weather is great today, the coffee is good, we are all in good shape, the data on the instrument is also good, and we are doing a great thing with a very low success rate on a sunny day." Then, Without any suspense, twists and turns, or any surprises, we succeeded. We caught the big treasure that the whole world wanted. Isn't this the most perfect day? So what do you want to say? I remember you are the famous minister of the Ministry of Idealistic Affairs, right? A foreign scholar said tremblingly. The Idealistic Affairs Department has been established for 6 years and has always had only one member. That person does not participate in research, he just does it, interferes, and then draws conclusions blindly, but he can always keep things on the right track. Liu Qiushan said, do you know what the biggest problem with perfect things is? It was still silent, but there was a hint of depression in the silence. That means perfect things are a hoax and don't exist. This sentence exploded in the conference room like a silent thunder. Liang Ke suddenly pulled the computer in front of him, looked up and shouted to the person in charge of the equipment department, transfer the equipment's work records to my computer. After the head of the equipment department lowered his head and took out his notebook to operate for a while, the working records of all the equipment were projected onto the big screen. All that vast amount of data was constantly traced back, and back, all the way back to 1212. That was their final stage of preparation. 121435 The containment plan was officially launched and visitors were summoned to Yueyang Tower. 12:1435.044060, observation position number 1 is activated. 12:1435.044060, observation position number 2 was activated. 12:1435.044060, observation position number 3 activated. All of them. All of. There are devices of different types, principles, and starting procedures throughout the city. Whether it is manual or not, whether the startup process is simple or complex, whether the operator of the equipment is dozing off or distracted, or whether coffee is suddenly spilled on the keyboard at the last moment before startup. All in all. At 12:1435.044060, all devices activated perfectly at the same time and hit the target. Even if Liang Ke enlarged the time unit to femtoseconds, there was still no error. Everyone looked at the timestamps automatically generated by the devices in silence. Everyone was horrified. They suddenly realized that they had accomplished something so easily. Something with zero probability. Chapter 82. Everyone was immersed in incomparable shock and seemed to be trapped in some deep fear. Only Lin Zheng sat there in a daze, looking obedient and bewildered. What exactly happened? Who can explain it to me? Why does everyone look so shocked? Do you want to ask? Would it be bad to ask now? After struggling for a while, Lin Zheng still spoke carefully, excuse me, who can give me a simple explanation of our situation? Liang Ke looked up at him, and after a long silence, he finally spoke. It is impossible and impossible for all different types of equipment to be started at the same time, said Liang Quebec. Why? Because objectively speaking, simultaneity itself is an extremely demanding concept. Absolute simultaneity almost does not exist. However, we have so many devices that are experiencing simultaneity at the femtosecond level. But what does this mean? Lin Zheng became more and more confused the more he listened. It means something that is impossible has happened. Liu Qiushan said in a deep voice, Lin Zheng, if you have a 6-sided dice now, can you throw a 7? No, it's not within the sample range. So do you think there is anyone who can throw a 7? Lin Zheng shook his head. Since the result does not exist, then the person who can achieve this result naturally does not exist. This is a very simple logic. Liang Ke took a deep breath and said, but we did it. Not only did we do it, but every dice we rolled ended up with 7. We're out of the sample, out of the normal likelihood, out of the correct probability. His expression suddenly turned grim. The success of Yueyang Tower in receiving the visitor is essentially a zero probability and absolutely impossible event. It is the number 7 on the 6-sided dice. But now, it's FG happening. It's not that the world is destroyed, it's that we no longer exist. The possibility of rolling a 7 with a 6-sided dice does not exist, so the person who can roll a 7 does not exist. The final conclusion is that they do not exist. Lin Zheng still didn't quite understand, but he seemed to understand something vaguely. But that's not right. Things that don't exist will not exist in any form. That is to say, the moment we complete the containment of the visitors, we should turn into nothingness. Someone stood up and refuted. And don't forget. Someone else suddenly stood up and said, after completing the containment, we received a letter of rectification agreement and even contacted the capital. All of this shows that we will not disappear." When he finished speaking, no one present felt relieved. Instead, several people suddenly turned pale. "No. That's impossible," he muttered to himself. "Did the capital give us any feedback? Track the source of that feedback," Liang Ke ordered. The Minister of Information immediately turned on his office computer and took out his mobile phone to operate it while giving instructions to the information center. Everyone else was silent, watching him busying himself frantically. 30 minutes, a full 30 minutes in which no other sound could be heard except the roar and scolding of the Minister of Information. Then the head of the observation center also joined in the busy event. Lin Zheng didn't understand the parameters they were talking about, but he could feel that things seemed to be moving in a direction that was not good for the Prism Bureau, and the two responsible persons were becoming more and more irritable. 30 minutes later, the Minister of Information looked up and said, "It has been confirmed that the signal source is inside. It has been confirmed that the space in the Yueyang Tower area has been greatly expanded. A huge enclave was created 10 kilometers away from us. There is no sign of life, but the signal source comes from this enclave. Its outline is like the capital city." The pressure in the conference room seemed to become even heavier. Liang Ke slowly raised his head and said, "That is to say, the visitor created a non-existent capital in this ending. Even the rectification agreement that contacted us, was created by him? Is he planning to create the world from scratch? No, it's not as simple as you think." Liu Qiushan suddenly spoke again, but this time his voice seemed a little weaker. "I see it, I see the trend." He shakily took out a cigarette from his pocket, his arms shaking. "This is a war that provokes the underlying logic, and we are now involved in this war." "Whose war is it?" someone asked. "The visitor and the Dark Moon Realm." He lit the cigarette, put it in his mouth and took a deep puff. "What I saw was that when we contain the visitors, we are not fighting against the visitors at all. Instead, we are fighting against the Dark Realm of the Moon. However, compared to the Dark Realm of the Moon, we are too small, even smaller than an ant. The probability of containing the visitors is 0 and impossible. But we still succeeded." Liang Ke murmured. "Yes, and the reason for our success is, the visitors wanted us to succeed, so we succeeded," Liu Qiushan continued. "The Dark Realm of the Moon made it impossible for the visitor to be taken in by Yueyang Tower, and the visitor made this impossible thing happen. This is their war. Both sides are dancing on the underlying logic of the world, and we have become the stone that is kicked away on this battlefield. What's even more terrifying is that the power of the visitors stabilized this wrong outcome and is generating all the reasonable logic, including the creation of the rectification agreement and the capital. No. It shouldn't be like this." Lin Zheng began to feel his hair stand on end. Yes, he did hope in his heart that Yueyang Tower could pull him out of the eternal night, but he only had this thought and no clear logic for its implementation. He also couldn't remember when the visitor's power had been so strong. But suddenly, Lin Zheng realized one thing. In this result, the visitor had been contained, so he was not in the eternal night, but right here, in Yueyang Tower. He was using the full visitor power. It's like a max-level account on the test server. He fully demonstrated his true strength in the Yueyang Tower that no longer existed, and unconsciously stabilized a non-existent result. Then he generated the capital, generated the rectification agreement, and generated everything that was logically related. This Yueyang Tower has become the world he created. Chapter 83. Lin Zheng couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. He realized a very serious problem. That is what limits the visitor's power. On the surface, it appears to be the eternal night, but in fact, it is himself. He only knew that the visitors were very powerful, and just thinking was enough to have a huge impact on the world. But he didn't know how to control the force effectively, like he was using the assault rifle as a club. He even began to doubt that he had actually been able to break through the eternal night, but he just hadn't found the right method. Suddenly, the phone in Lin Zheng's pocket vibrated, and he subconsciously took out his phone. It was a text message, and the sender was Liu Qiushan. It reads, "You must refuse." Reject? Reject what? Lin Zheng subconsciously looked at Liu Qiushan, not knowing why his condition seemed to be getting worse. But he still sat up straight, operating an old-fashioned and outdated mobile phone with one hand. Facing Lin Zheng's questioning gaze, he did not react at all, but just naturally put the phone on the table, as if the text message was not sent by him. No matter what, we must return to the correct ending, said a scholar. Lin Zheng, now that we have found the wound, can you use the power of the visitor to put everything back on track? In theory, this can be done. After all, the necessary condition for the result to remain stable is that the visitor is in Yueyang Tower. So as long as the visitors disappear, they can get back on track. But suddenly, Lin Zheng remembered the text message Liu Qiushan sent him. You're going to refuse? He suddenly understood that Liu Qiushan seemed to want him to refuse this request. And it seems that rejection is indeed better for me. After all, I did break through the eternal night in this non-existent world. This could be a very important clue. Lin Zheng took a deep breath and said, I'm sorry, I said from the beginning that the power of the visitor is uncontrollable. But the wound has been found, you should be able to do it. He is just the first person involved in the visitor's case, not the visitor himself. Liu Qiushan suddenly spoke a little angrily. What are you going to do with Lin Zheng? Dear visitor brother, I know I was wrong, will you let us go? I will let you play with me from now on, is that right? Lin Zheng, 6 Liu Qiushan began to bleed from his nose, and drops of blood fell on the table, which was particularly eye-catching. Liang Ke was a little panicked when he saw this scene. He suddenly stood up and said, Liu Qiushan, are you still using that? Do you want to die? It's okay, trust me. Liu Qiushan wiped the blood from his nose and said, this is very necessary for me now. Lin Zheng was absolutely certain that Liu Qiushan really hoped that he could refuse to help them. But why? Although he already had some guesses about Liu Qiushan's extraordinary abilities, he still couldn't find any reason why Liu Qiushan wanted him to refuse. We really can't rely on the power of the visitor anymore. That power is too huge. Given Lin Zheng's current condition, I'm afraid we can't make this power work the way we want. Liang Ke said with a frown. And we should still have a way to save ourselves. As long as we can make the fact that the visitor is taken in by us disappear, we should be able to go back. But he is a physical entity now. How should we make an entity completely disappear from a material world? I'm afraid this can only be done by a very powerful reality twister. Someone asked. But they don't have any reality benders now, because in order to ensure the stability of Yueyang Tower, they have been preventing reality benders from entering. What if we throw that body into the void? Someone asked. Liang Ke was silent for a while, shook his head and said, it's too risky. If it doesn't meet expectations, we won't even have a chance to regret it. For a moment, their discussion seemed to have reached a deadlock. They had become a completely independent world, and in this independent world, they did not have the means to completely erase the visitors. I think we are heading in the wrong direction. Liu Qiushan suddenly said, I think this world was not created by the visitor. It did not actively guide the birth of this non-existent world. This world was created based on the outcome of visitors are contained, and its development is to ensure that outcome holds. It's like a novel. The theme of the novel is that the visitors are contained. The world will generate whatever the plot requires. If a rectification agreement is needed, then create a rectification agreement. If a capital is needed, then create a capital. If 100,000 people are needed to celebrate, then create 100,000 people. This is a logical progression. The visitor is God. God can create the world, but he will not make a walking tractor. The rectification protocol and the capital were not created by him. They are the result of the logical development of our actions. So what do we do? Someone asked. Liang Ke seemed to understand, we have to convince the visitor, use a reasonable and harmonious logic, and make the visitor believe that he is not taken in by Yueyang Tower. Contact the strict protocol and send them a letter telling them that we are going to transfer the visitor to them for containment. But we can't contact the outside world right now. Just as he finished speaking, the Minister of Information raised his head in shock. You mean we should contact that fictitious rectification agreement? Right. Everyone present was stunned, even Lin Zheng himself was stunned. In other words, as a visitor, he would be taken in by a fictitious salvation organization created by himself unconsciously? The visitor will be contained by himself? But more importantly, this method seems to be feasible. Both the rectification protocol and the visitor entities they contain are essentially non-existent things. Unify non-existent things, hand over the visitor entity that should not exist to the rectification agreement that should not exist, and rewrite the fact that the visitor was accommodated in Yueyang Tower in a logical way. But what will the rectification agreement of this world look like? Someone asked. I don't know. If you want to know this, I guess we can only ask the visitor himself. Liang Ke answered in a low voice. But the visitor himself, he didn't know either. Lin Zheng also didn't know what this rectification protocol, which was constructed unconsciously with his full power, was like. He had never seen the purification agreement and had never come into contact with them. He only knew that the organization seemed very mysterious and powerful. Anyway, this seems to be our only option, so we have to give it a try anyway. Chapter 84. At 2:05 p.m., the Yueyang Tower Information Center drafted a request for the visitor's transfer. This transfer application is completely in accordance with the communication format of the rectification protocol in the real world. The Minister of Information pressed the send button, and the text projected on the main screen changed from waiting to be sent to sending. After a few seconds, sending changed to sending completed, and then the crowd began to whisper. The sending was completed, which meant that the transfer request was indeed conveyed to the communication target, and it also meant that the rectification agreement fabricated by the visitor was real. Will they agree? Lin Zheng asked Liu Qiushan, who was standing next to him. But it was not Liu Qiushan who answered him, but Liang Ke. He also looked up at the completed text on the huge display screen and said, I don't know, but I think they will agree. The rectification agreement in this world should be similar to the rectification agreement in the real world. The real world sanctioning protocol would not reject this transfer request, so they should not reject it either. 5 minutes later, a bright red warning message popped up on the screen, indicating the reply to the rectification agreement that was not supposed to exist. The content of the reply letter was very simple. The transfer request is approved by the Suhan agreement. Please agree on the transfer location. This reply letter did not make the people present feel relieved. Instead, it made many people feel stressed. Until now, they still don't know what they are dealing with. Where is the transfer location? Asked the Minister of Information. Trace the source of the signal first. Liang Ke said expressionlessly as he looked at the reply letter. The Information Center and the Observation Department began to work together to trace the source of the signal of the correction protocol, until they reached a conclusion 20 minutes later. The source of the signal has not been found, not in the fictional capital, nor anywhere in this world. The so-called rectification agreements remain a ghost signal, they still do not exist. In silence, the Minister of Information swallowed and asked, what should we do next? Send a letter with the agreed location, set it on the shore of Dongting Lake, send him the detailed coordinates, and tell him we will make the handover there. The Minister of Information's fingers jumped quickly on the keyboard, the letter was sent normally, and this time they still received a reply quickly. The application has been approved. The rectification agreement will arrive at the designated location in 3 hours. Please be prepared. This non-existent organization even agreed to conduct a face-to-face handover with them without hesitation. 3 hours later? So what will we see in 3 hours? The Minister of Information's voice trembled a little. I don't know. Perhaps it's the rectification protocol in the visitor's cognition. The rectification agreement in your own understanding? Lin Zheng began to think about what the rectification agreement he imagined would look like, but after thinking about it carefully, imagination and cognition seemed to be different. Imagination may not be based on real logic, but cognition must be based on reality. And his understanding of the rectification agreement? He had no idea about the true purification protocol. He only knew that they dealt with anomalies and were the strongest organization in the main material world. The strongest? What does the strongest organization look like in your own perception? Lin Zheng was unsure for a moment, but he was not as confused as the others. Instead, he actually had a hint of anticipation. The observation department should continue to observe the entire area. If you detect the formation of a new enclave, remember to tell me. Liang Ke looked a little tired. The rest of you should take a rest and eat something. Everyone will gather at the meeting point in 2 hours. Of course, this is not mandatory. You don't have to go if you don't want to. This long meeting was finally declared over, and Lin Zheng finally had some time to rest. A temporary logistics team began to distribute dry food, bread, instant noodles, mineral water, and hot water to everyone. People were squatting or sitting in the corridors and stairs of the conference room, and eating on expensive instruments. The scene seemed a bit chaotic. Lin Zheng found a more secluded corridor and sat down, drinking mineral water and eating bread. But before he could take a few bites, Liu Qiushan sat down next to him and handed him a bucket of instant noodles. It's a hot commodity, many people are trying to get it. Luckily I have some flesh on my body, otherwise I would not be able to get it. Lu Qiushan said with a smile. Lin Zheng took the instant noodles, unplugged the fork and said, "Why don't you want me to solve this matter?" "Because that development trend is not good for me." Lu Qiushan paused and said, "It is not good for you either. It's not that it will cause any harm to us, but it is not good for us to achieve our desired goals. So your extraordinary ability is really to predict the future. How is that possible? There is no such thing as the ability to predict the future in the world. The human brain cannot bear that level of power. Only very high-level anomalies can predict the future. So you're still not going to tell me what your superpower is?" "No, this is confidential, but I can tell you what I'm looking for." Lu Qiushan picked up the noodles with a fork and put them into his mouth to chew. "I'm looking for a way to save the world." "The way to save the world?" SSS-003, Endless Destruction. This anomaly is an unsolvable anomaly. It is invisible and intangible but always exists and is destroying our world. No matter what we do, we will be destroyed by it in the end. Lu Qiushan said. This thing exists in official archives, and it is also recognized as an SSS-level anomaly, but in fact, no one knows what it is except me. I can't even tell others its true appearance. Everyone who knows what it is dead except me. When he said this, Lu Qiushan seemed to have some emotion. I am the one who confirmed his existence, and I am also the only one who can fight against it. It's like we are old enemies. So you've found a way to deal with it now? Lu Qiushan shook his head and said, "Not yet, but soon. I think it's very close, very close." He suddenly turned his head and looked at Lin Zheng and said, "Lin Zheng, you know what? I think we are invincible together. I will help you judge right from wrong, and then you can do it boldly, and everything will go smoothly. It's a pity that we can't be partners." "Why can't we become partners?" Lin Zheng asked curiously. Lu Qiushan touched his chin and said, "Then Lin Zheng, are you willing to be my partner?" "I don't want to, and the way you talk is disgusting." "See, I told you we couldn't be partners." Chapter 85. 3 hours is not a long time. After Lin Zheng finished his meal, he felt that he had not had time to move around before the time was almost up. He hurried to the intersection by the lake. At 2.5 hours, people had already started gathering near the handover point. After being contained for several hours, the visitor's entity was fished out of the icy lake and placed in a square white metal container along with its transparent glass box. The crowd surrounded it from a distance, forming a huge, loose circle. Lin Zheng began to wait with Liang Ke and Lu Qiushan, waiting for the fictitious rectification agreement to come in half an hour. However, Liang Ke was still very busy at this time. "Aren't there any new enclaves created yet?" he asked the observation department. "If no new enclave is created, will the headquarters of the rectification agreement be directly created in the capital?" the observation department asked in return. "It shouldn't be possible." Lu Qiushan shook his head and said, "Because we all know that the headquarters of the rectification agreement is not in the capital." "Then in the real world, where is the capital of the rectification agreement? A Western federal country? Or somewhere else?" Lin Zheng asked. Lu Qiushan shook his head and said, "No one in the world knows that the rectification agreement has never revealed its position. Most of the time, they communicate through letters. If the matter is urgent, they will find a way to find you directly. If the matter is particularly big, so big that they have to intervene, then their talents will appear in the world. They intentionally hide their location. Who knows? Maybe they don't have the money to build an office building, but they are too embarrassed to say so, so they just do freelance work or something. It feels a bit bad if this continues." Liang Ke interrupted the conversation with some concern. He lowered his head and swiped his fingers on the work tablet, looking a little anxious. "The observation department has not detected the formation of any new enclaves. The information department has been communicating with the Suhan agreement. The reply from the other side was very fast, but until now, the ghost signal cannot be traced back to the source." "What does this mean?" Lin Zheng found the answer as soon as he asked. "So, up to now, the rectification agreement has not been physically generated." "I'm afraid that's the case, but why is it like this?" Liang Ke muttered to himself, as if asking and answering himself. "I remembered a legend about the rectification protocol, which says that the rectification protocol is the strongest anomaly. Maybe because it is stronger than the visitor cannot understand it, so it cannot be generated." Lu Qiushan looked at him with some disdain and said, Are you so panicked that you bring urban legends to work? Why not quit early and go home to sell potatoes? If I resign now, I can only raise fish in Dongting Lake, and this water is not suitable for fish breeding. Liang Ke exhaled lightly and continued, this world is a world of nothingness based on logic. The birth and development of things are driven by logic. The problem now is that the rectification agreement still does not exist. That said, it defies logic for them not to come because they have already agreed to our request. But they are here, which still defies logic because up to now, the cleansing agreement still does not exist. In this situation, we may really be completely stuck here. Maybe in half an hour, this world will turn into nothingness due to the collapse of logic. Liu Qiushan didn't care at all. He scratched his chest and said nonchalantly, I think the visitor will definitely find a way. Even if we take a step back, the rectification agreement might send a message later saying the car broke down on the way, the leader drank too much, we are busy today and don't have enough staff, which can make the logic round. Then at least we should generate a broken down car or a drunk leader. I hope it's not a drunk leader. Liu Qiushan said. In any case, they seem to have suddenly reached a critical juncture of life and death. No. It should be said that their survival rate seemed to be steadily declining. If the visitor is unable to generate an entity that complies with the protocol of rectification, then the best case scenario is that they will remain trapped here, and the worst case scenario is that they will disappear into nothingness the moment the agreed time arrives. Time continued to advance minute by minute, and Yueyang Tower began to enter the transition period between afternoon and dusk. The originally cool and humid air began to turn into chill. In the last 5 minutes, the observation center and the information center were still trying to find traces of the generation of the correction protocol, but still found nothing. The rectification agreement has not yet been generated. However, only the information department, observation department, and Liang Ke knew this intelligence, so there was no commotion among the crowd. Lin Zheng turned his head and looked at Liu Qiushan, and asked anxiously, do you think they will really come? Liu Qiushan showed an extremely shocked expression on his face. Ah? You ask me about this? Don't you know whether to come or not? I don't seem to know. Liu Qiushan sighed deeply and said, who knows, maybe nothing will come and we will all be finished together. But if that is the case, it proves that we are all finished, which is a good thing for future development. However, as the first person affected, you will be fine. He turned his head and looked at Liang Ke who was standing not far away and said, Old Liang, still no. Liang Ke shook his head. They didn't say the car broke down or the leader was drunk or anything like that. Liang Ke shook his head. The last 30 seconds, but at this moment Liang Ke no longer held out any hope. Without the main body of the rectification agreement, the logical chain would be broken whether they appeared or not. However, Liang Ke's mentality quickly returned to stability. After all, he was a man who had experienced many ups and downs, and at this moment Liang Ke even felt a little relieved. At least this shows that the visitor is not as powerful as they imagined. He still has his limits, and there are some things that even the visitor cannot do. Ding, ding, ding. The time reminder set by Liang Ke rang, and at the same time, reminder sounds rang out one after another throughout the square, which meant that the agreed time had arrived. There was no convoy driving slowly over, no plane flying from afar, and no regular appearance according to the protocol. It seemed as if nothing had happened. There are still no enclaves generated on the global observation map. Liang Ke lowered his head and looked at the tablet in his hand for the last time, and suddenly saw a striking red letter. The rectification agreement has arrived. Chapter 86. Hot, light, and beyond that there was a silent roar. Lin Zheng stood in the crowd. Like everyone else present, he could sense something was wrong. Everyone was screaming, but they couldn't hear what each other was saying. Some people lost their balance for no reason and fell to the ground, but what was even more bizarre was the Dongting Lake. The entire surface of the lake was gradually rising above the shore, and the huge amount of water seemed to be rushing towards the sky. Someone raised his hand and pointed at the sun, dancing and shouting something, but Lin Zheng still couldn't hear it. He followed the other person's gesture and looked towards the sky. A thin silver-grey line suddenly appeared in the sky, like a silver needle inserted into the sun from the side. Even though the sun's light was so scorching, this silver needle could not be erased. It cannot be covered up, it cannot be illuminated, it absorbs all light, and its center is expanding into an ever-distorting mirror that reflects the endless starry sky. The next moment, a huge, gigantic, incomparable thing suddenly descended. They could no longer see the sun, and the entire area was shrouded in its haze. Liang Ke looked up at this thing and his mind went blank, just like a mayfly suddenly seeing the blue sky. It was a starship, a huge starship, perhaps hundreds of kilometers, perhaps thousands of kilometers across. It was a slender and majestic diamond shape, and presented a very deep crimson color. The rectification protocol had never been generated in the Yueyang Tower area. It was generated in the endless void and reached the Yueyang Tower in an instant by means of a super time and space jump. The thin clouds were blown away, the water surface fell back like thunder, the strong wind whistled in everyone's ears, all the sounds came back, but no one could say a word anymore. Correction agreement. The protocols of rectification created by the visitors. Lin Zheng realized that this was the strongest power in his cognition, and it was also the power that he could contain himself in his cognition. A power that is completely above their world, a power that is not bound by anything, and a power that can reach infinity in an instant. At this moment, everyone present was caught in an incomparable shock and unable to extricate themselves. Each of them could feel that they had come into contact with something more macroscopic. They could not understand or describe this kind of contact. It was like an ant suddenly catching a glimpse of the finger of God. An incomprehensible state and incomprehensible power. Even at this moment, Liang Ke actually began to regret it. He even wondered if he really wanted to hand over the visitor entity to the rectification agreement. Did he really want to let this result disappear? But there is no point in regretting at this time. The huge starship began to emit a deafening and rhythmic roar. Under this roar, it seemed that an invisible force field began to spread throughout the area. Then a huge container containing the visitor entity floated in the air and was firmly fixed. Then, it leaped again, with roars, strong whines, and lake water as violent as a dragon. When it disappeared from the sky, the container carrying the visitor entity also disappeared. The light became brighter, the clouds in the sky slowly gathered, and a violent wind swept across the entire Yueyang Tower in an instant. The blown-up lake water turned into a heavy rain, pouring down. Liu Qiushan stood in the rainstorm, staring blankly at the empty sky. His bloated figure looked like a Buddha. His face was very pale, and blood was gushing out of his eyes, nose, and ears. He murmured, "I found it, the way to save the world." Then Liu Qiushan fell to the ground with a bang. Gate number 3 has returned to normal and is reconnected to the main material world. Gate number 7 has returned to normal and is reconnected to the main material world. Gates 6 and 9 have returned to normal. After the visitors completely disappeared from this material world, in the next few hours, just as Liang Ke expected, they were gradually returning to the normal world. Lin Zheng leaned against the wall next to the emergency center, looking at the bright light bulbs on the ceiling. After a while, Liang Ke came out and leaned next to Lin Zheng. "He can't be saved," Liang Ke said simply and clearly. He looked calm, but his eyes still could not hide the sadness and pain. This time he is really being targeted by endless consumption. 003, endless destruction, what exactly is that? Lin Zheng asked him. No one knows. We can only confirm its existence from the deaths it caused. For example, the phrase 3 times means death. Do you think there is a word in this world that will kill you if you say it 3 times in a row? Of course Lin Zheng remembered the word. It was in his mind, but he couldn't understand it or write it down. It was just a meaningless sound that he could only understand when he returned to his original body. There are about 9 saviors in the world. Liu Qiushan is one of them. He is also the only person in the world who is interfered with by SSS 42. 42? Serial number 42? Are there so many SSS levels? But Lin Zheng quickly realized that there was something wrong with the serial number. Nowadays, the serial numbers commonly used in the world are all 3 digits, but the format of SSS 42 is wrong. If we explain it by serial number, it should be 004. You should know that the definition of SSS level is not how much damage it causes, but that it is incomprehensible, unconfrontational, and uncontainable. They are all monsters that can provoke the underlying logic of the world. So you still want to take in visitors? Lin Zheng pulled the corner of his mouth, but he couldn't laugh at Liu Qiushan's current situation. We have to find a way. We can't just sit there and wait for death because we can't do anything. Liang Ke shook his head, but judging from the current situation, that guy is probably beyond the scope of SSS level, and the dark realm of the moon, that place is also weird and abnormal. The struggle between the two of them can even tear apart possibilities. He sighed silently and continued, let's continue to talk about SSS 42. The reason it is marked as 42 is because it can only be 42. It represents the ultimate answer. The ultimate answer to what? The ultimate answer to everything. Liu Qiushan had seen it many years ago, and then was interfered with. Theoretically, he can see the final outcome of everything. But the reality is that he couldn't do it. The human body couldn't bear the impact of the ultimate answer. The limit of what he could do was just to judge the development trend of a certain thing. Later, he observed the endless extinction. He realized that this thing was slowly destroying the world, and then he fought against it. Endless consumption is also looking for him, trying to get into his mind and kill him all the time, while he is avoiding the influence of endless consumption. Now endless consumption has finally found him, but he has also finally found a way to save the world. What method? Lin Zheng asked. I don't know. He is writing down the plan with his last breath, but he needs to do some preparation for us before that. Lin Zheng looked at Liang Ke, waiting for him to continue. Liang Ke hesitated for a moment and said, forget it. Old Liu believes in you anyway, and his judgment will not be wrong. He said that we should seek help from the rectification agreement, the rectification agreement that no longer exists. Chapter 87. The Yueyang Tower, which had returned to normal, began to experience wind and rain. Thick black clouds rolled up in the far distance of Dongting Lake. The entire lake seemed a little violent, and people were shivering in the cold wind and rain. It is mentioned in the description of Yueyang Tower that when an important person dies, the building will also undergo climate change, which represents the decline of Dongzhou's national fortune as a country. In this absurd world, the fate of every country is closely related to each other. The death of a savior will bring huge losses to the whole world. So he thinks we should continue to contact that fictitious purging protocol? But that purging protocol should no longer exist along with the visitors. Lin Zheng said. Do you think the visitor might not exist? And was he wiped out by himself? Liang Q's eyes flashed with a faint fear. He said, Liu Qiushan believes that it must still exist in some form. We must find a way to interact with it and let it provide us with help. Will it? Yes, logically it is a salvation organization that protects humanity. Liang Ke paused, leaned against the wall and said, but the problem is that we can't find a way to interact, and we don't know what Liu Qiushan wants us to find, or what requirements he wants to put forward for the rectification agreement. Hey? Didn't he leave any documents? Lin Zheng asked. No one can understand that document. It can only be deciphered when the next SSS-42 subject is born. Couldn't he have avoided it when he wrote? He said there was no way around it. He was worried that the meaning of the text would be misinterpreted. The way to save the world must be described accurately and in detail, otherwise all the previous efforts would be wasted if it went astray. Lin Zheng was silent for a while and said, can I take a look? Lin Zheng thought Liang Ke might think about it for a while, but Liang Ke nodded without hesitation and said, of course, the original of this thing will be preserved, and we will spread the copies and electronic copies to various countries as much as possible to screen the people involved in SSS-42. But not yet. You may have to wait a few more hours because the plan is still in the packaging and preservation stage. I can only show it to you after it is packaged and preserved. Also, regarding you, I now agree with what Lao Liu said. We must ensure that you always remain the strongest visitor. We must firmly grasp the visitor's summoning authority in the hands of the order force. You must be stronger than that war. Lin Zheng did not see Liu Qiushan's body. He heard that Liu Qiushan explicitly requested not to hold a funeral, saying that he did not want his death to affect anyone's work for even an hour. But that night the wind and rain stopped at Yueyang Tower, and the data from the meteorological center returned to normal, showing a lower number that kept jumping slightly. This is the norm in this world. Anything can happen, but the probability of these things happening is often not high. At about 10 o'clock in the evening, he was arranged to read the salvation plan drafted by Liu Qiushan. This object, which symbolizes the future destiny of mankind, is tightly sealed and placed in a room made entirely of concrete with extremely strict security, covered by a square glass cover. When someone wants to read it, they have to go through security check and be accompanied by 2 security personnel. They are not even allowed to touch the glass cover when reading and can only stand outside a red line and use special magnifying equipment to read it. But this so-called salvation plan does not seem to be very advanced, and the content on it is not long. Lin Zheng even feels that there may be nothing technical about it, and it may just be an idea. It was simply written on a piece of hastily torn notebook paper. The torn edge looked like it had been gnawed by a dog, and there were traces of blood on it. It was unclear whether it was a nosebleed or something else. Moreover, Liu Qian's handwriting is really ugly and crooked. But the strange thing is that these characters seem to be the most commonly used characters in Dongzhou, but when Lin Zheng tried to read them, he didn't recognize any of them. It was as if he was looking at mysterious symbols left by primitive people without any reference. He knew it was the endless attrition at work, that strange, world-encompassing reality distortion. After a while Lin Zheng shook his head and said, "No, I don't understand it either." "What's the visitor's status?" Liang Ke asked. "I don't know, maybe I can try it if I have the chance in the future." Liang Ke shook his head and said, "Let's not do it. You can't control that power yet. If the content is distorted by the power of the visitor, no one knows what the result will be. Before you can fully control that power, we can't try it easily." Lin Zheng nodded silently, but he still tried his best to imprint these crooked and completely incomprehensible characters in his mind. That night he still stayed in the room assigned to him in Yueyang Tower, because he had to discuss his own problems with Liang Ke tomorrow, and there was also something he wanted to verify. The Yueyang Tower was not peaceful at night. The people who had been sent out before were returning. The sound of vehicles passing through the small urban area could be heard from time to time. The meteorological center and the experimental building were still brightly lit. From a distance, one could see that even late at night, the building was still full of people. Lin Zheng closed the doors and windows and prepared to start his experiment. He found a thick blanket to wrap his body, leaned on the sofa with his eyes closed in a comfortable position, and then slowly died. He wanted to know what would happen when he returned to his original form at Yueyang Tower, or on the eternal night, or would returning at Yueyang Tower lead him back to nothingness. From life to death and from death to life again, Lin Zheng opened his eyes again, and then sighed silently in his heart. What appeared before his eyes was still the boundless city of 10,000 towers and the annoying moon of eternal tranquility. In fact, this result is similar to what Lin Zheng expected. After all, now both he and Yueyang Tower have returned to the correct result. In the correct result, his original body is still trapped in the eternal night. The containment breach that he and Yueyang Tower had jointly caused no longer existed. But it doesn't matter, he still has plenty of time. Even if he doesn't make any progress now, Yongning Night is still at a disadvantage. They dare not attack him, nor do they dare to hurt the people around him, and they don't even dare to move easily. He began to recall in his mind the second thing he was going to do. He closed his eyes and began to construct the scene in his mind. Suddenly he was back in the small concrete room. He read Liu Qian's suicide note through a thick glass cover, but this time Lin Zheng was finally able to recognize the words. Inside. Chapter 88. This letter is to the SSS-42 recipient. I am the first SSS-42 recipient, Liu Qian. SSS-003 Endless Destruction is absolutely the most disgusting, vicious, craziest, and most FGBD anomaly in the world. Its essence is the lock on macro concepts such as deep space, outer space, and the universe. It is a distortion of reality that makes people never think about whether the universe exists or how the world works. It covered human eyes, preventing people from looking at the starry sky, and erased the universe and all related concepts from human minds, turning people into ants and monkeys, and turning the world into a huge prison. Do you know what this means? This means that we can only die in this world with this mess of anomalies. Even if we can suppress these anomalies, we will die due to resource exhaustion or be killed by the continuous outbreak of anomalies. This is our only ending, an ending that cannot even be changed. But in our long history, in the past that even I cannot know or see, we have set foot on the moon, the spacecraft we sent have sailed in the universe, and we have sent information to the solar system, seeking companions in deep space. When we first landed on the moon, the whole world celebrated, we wrote songs, we partied, and we began to have endless imaginations about the universe. It's just that we all have forgotten, including history, memory, technology, and everything else. We can no longer exceed the first cosmic speed. This is the essence of endless destruction, it is a directional forgetting, degradation, and blockade. Next comes a statement about salvation, yes, about salvation. The rectification protocol fabricated by the visitors, although it is fictional, the technology it demonstrates, I am very sure is hyperspace jump technology, a space technology based on string theory, which can bring spacecraft into hyperspace for jump navigation. If we could get these technologies and make them a reality in the real world, then we could get out of this fed up world. In other words, we have to escape from this world. I don't know if there are abnormalities in the universe, but in the vast universe, there may be no concept of abnormalities at all, everything is normal. And it is infinitely large, there are too many places we can go. If the anomaly spreads to 10 light years away, we will jump to 20 light years away. If it spreads to 200,000 light years away, we will jump to 400,000 light years away. We can reproduce on our starship until we find another home. If anomalies are everywhere, we can find a corner without anomalies to settle down. If anomalies have already spread to every corner of the universe, then that means this entire universe has absolutely no FG meaning at all. Humans don't need to struggle to survive anymore. Destruction is our destiny. We should just detonate our fleet and calmly face the final outcome. I have already made an oral presentation to Yueyang Tower about the following content, but I can only tell you this successor in more detail. I would like to state my understanding of the rectification protocol created by the visitors. I believe it has not disappeared, but has simply collapsed. The result of the visitor was taken in by Yueyang Tower collapsed to the visitor was taken in by the non-existent rectification agreement. This result should still exist in nothingness and has not completely disappeared. Yueyang Tower, this is an important note. The power of the visitors in this area is far beyond our expectations, which means that there is some kind of connection between the two. As long as we use this connection, we may be able to connect with the non-existent rectification agreement. What follows is a rough guess about the Purge Protocol. The current Purge Protocol is still a product driven by the logic of visitors being contained. Its nature is similar to a legend. In the legend, it possesses the strongest technological power and unwaveringly protects the world. All we have to do is to constantly guide and improve this legend. Just like religion originated from ancient legends but eventually influenced people's behavior, I believe it will eventually affect reality, at least it will affect Yueyang Tower. Finally, considering the special nature of the visitor as an anomaly, I do not recommend directly requesting any equipment from the rectification protocol he created, as the way it operates is likely to be inconsistent with the laws of the material world. What we require is deep space technology that is based on the material world and can operate without the influence of anomalies, including spacecraft design, launch, orbital flight, and hyperspace jump. Starting from the launch of the first spacecraft and the exploration of the moon, we must keep moving forward and build our own first home ship. Not just one, we must have a fleet that can achieve internal circulation and meet the needs of the entire race's deep space migration. I don't know how many years it will take, 100 years? 200 years? 300 years? 500 years? But as long as we use the power of the visitors properly, and use guidance and interaction to let the rectification agreement help us, one day we will escape from this hell and head for the Sea of Stars. My successor, the next person involved in SSS 42, I don't know when you will appear, but when you read this letter, please push forward this plan at all costs. You must become a liar who deceives the heaven and everyone. In addition, protect Lin Zheng, do not doubt him, do not restrict him. I don't know what he is, but he is the key, and we must use the key to contact the Suhan agreement. The last paragraph is written to Lin Zheng. It would be best if you are the first one to see this letter. If it is written by someone else, please convey it on my behalf. I like Xiaobai very much, and I like you too. Xiaobai likes you too. I don't know why I left these words, but I still wrote them down. I want you to understand that humans have never hated visitors, just as we never hated the cruel nature during the ape era. I don't know what relationship you, as the first person involved, have with the visitors, but if possible, please don't let the visitors hate humans. The letter ended with no signature or other greetings, only a few drops of dark blood. Lin Zheng didn't know what mood Liu Qiushan was in when he wrote such a letter, and he didn't know how much he saw in himself. He even found it a little ridiculous because this salvation plan was too crude and full of a tiny human being's wishful thinking about the universe. And it is too far away, so far that it may take hundreds or even thousands of years to prepare. He wanted to laugh, but couldn't. He just pulled the corners of his mouth with difficulty and looked at the last paragraph. Humans have never hated visitors, and visitors have never hated humans. The visitor they revere is nothing more than a fool who has strayed into this bizarre world and can't even find his way. Chapter 89. The emotions in his heart did not last long before Lin Zheng suppressed them. He quickly grasped a key piece of information in the letter, which was that the result of his breakthrough in the eternal night seemed to still exist. It still exists in the void. So, if it still exists, how can I go to the world of nothingness? When this thought came into Lin Zheng's mind, he suddenly fell from the sky and sat on the ground with his butt. Hiss! He took a breath and felt like his tailbone was broken. He rolled on the ground and opened his eyes. He was no longer in the eternal night, but curled up on the cold metal floor with bright fluorescent lights above his head. Lin Zheng reacted immediately. He jumped into the non-existent void rectification agreement. Is it that simple? All it takes is a thought? Please do not sit on the floor and do not break containment at will. A cold and emotionless female voice sounded. Who? Lin Zheng quickly got up and looked around, but found nothing. The owner of the voice seemed to be invisible. The core of the technology, the core of the rectification protocol, the strongest power you know and imagine. The voice sounded again, I repeat, please do not break the containment. Lin Zheng's expression became more serious, what if I refuse? If you refuse, then I can't do anything about it. The voice suddenly took on a hint of resentment. My essence is nothing more than your creation. If you don't want to continue this containment show with me, then I can't do anything about it. Ah! Lin Zheng suddenly felt a subtle embarrassment. Well, you're quite easy to talk to, but why can't I see you? Because you didn't create an entity for me, you just felt that there should be such a thing as me, and maybe you should take a good look at the things you created, said the technical core. Lin Zheng stood up and looked around, only to find that the interior of this huge starship was empty, only a huge shell made of metal plates and a rough metal frame. There were no instruments, no fuel, no bridge, no operators, and the cold and emptiness extended all the way to where the ship was completely out of sight. How can this thing fly? Lin Zheng couldn't understand, he couldn't understand it at all, but this thing could fly, and it could also jump. Does this make sense? Because you think it can fly. Nothingness doesn't need a core or rules, it only needs a simple logic. The technical core replied. It's the same as you writing a sentence on a piece of paper. There is a starship here, housing visitors. Then you play the visitor and I play the starship. So you mean I can even create a world? The technical core did not answer, but the entire wall in front of Lin Zheng suddenly disappeared, and in front of him was a huge, blue planet that appeared in Lin Zheng's sight, exuding a tranquil atmosphere. Looking at this huge planet, Lin Zheng was extremely shocked. Are there cities on this planet? Lin Zheng asked. Now it has. The planet came towards him and continued to enlarge, finally stopping at a city. Lin Zheng remembered this city, this was his hometown on Earth, even the iconic buildings were restored. I remember the city had a population of 7.3 million, Lin Zheng recalled. A dense crowd of people appeared on the street, but everyone was still. Lin Zheng raised his hand, and they raised their hands too. Lin Zheng took a small step back, and they did the same. These people are not alive. They are just projections of Lin Zheng himself. How do I create living life? Set up a form of reproduction that you know of. As soon as he finished speaking, countless bloody fungus blankets instantly covered the entire city. Countless huge Lu Zheng Yuan began to appear in the streets and alleys, and then began to reproduce continuously. FK. Stop, stop, stop. Lin Zheng shouted hurriedly, and the next moment, the entire planet suddenly disappeared and turned into nothingness again. Do you have some understanding of nothingness now? The technical core asked him. Lin Zheng finally recovered from the visual impact of the scene just now. He patted his chest and said, I seem to understand a little bit. I can only create things according to my cognition. In other words, if I really want to create the world, I still have to watch documentaries about the origin of the planets first. Work hard to learn scientific and cultural knowledge and life knowledge. And when you stop looking at them or forget about them, they disappear because they don't exist. He sighed softly, sat down on the ground and stared at the endless nothingness, saying, so in the test server, even though I'm at full status, there are no main quests, no side plots, no objects to interact with, nothing at all, just a big empty sandbox. Yes. Besides us, there is nothing else in this void, right? Perhaps. The test server is more boring than I thought. Lin Zheng raised his head and sighed softly. He closed his eyes and began to expand his spiritual realm. Perhaps it was because his original spiritual realm was too powerful, or perhaps it was because he had no concept of distance in his void. He could feel his spiritual realm expanding without limit, and he even felt that perhaps the entire nothingness was compressing towards him. Dull, tedious, nothing can be perceived, nothing exists, not even a boundary. Lin Zheng didn't know how much time had passed, so long that he was about to give up, when suddenly, he sensed something, like the feeling of a surging wave hitting a reef. What is that? Lin Zheng wondered. The next moment, the endless nothingness seemed to suddenly collapse with him as the center, and the things discovered by Lin Zheng were dragged in front of him in an instant. And when he saw clearly what was in front of him, an incomparable shock pierced through his heart. Floating in the void are the wreckage of thousands of spacecraft. Rockets, satellites, space launch pads, and giant starships more than 10 kilometers long, they were suspended in the void, colliding silently with each other. Some of the hulls had been torn apart, and huge words could be faintly seen on the hulls. Humanity's Joint Expeditionary Fleet, Dongzhou No 36. Sky Explorer. 303 Space Telescope. These aircraft from different eras, representing mankind's advanced technology, were just thrown into the void, like a huge space garbage dump. At this moment, he suddenly realized that he seemed not to be the first thing to arrive in the void. Something had been here long before him, and it had these things that once belonged to humans. Here. Chapter 90. Lin Zheng's figure kept flashing through the vast ruins. When he wanted to reach a certain location, he would appear there. He entered the interior of a starship. It did not look old or dilapidated, but after a long period of collision and friction, the starship had been torn open with several huge wounds. This starship is completely different from the rectification protocol he created. It conforms to physical facts and logic, and has reasonable and complex functional divisions. Hydroponic vertical farms, eco parks, residential areas, life support systems, and many more things that Lin Zheng had never seen before. Although it is obvious that this starship does not have the ability to jump, it can still achieve interstellar voyages of a certain distance. Is this an achievement that humans have ever achieved? Lin Zheng looked at this complex, sophisticated, and huge natural object. It was hard for him to imagine that this thing had once appeared in human history, but then it disappeared. All of these things were lost in nothingness. Was this done by endless consumption? Can the power of endless consumption also extend into the void? Does it have a physical body, or does it lurk in the void? Lin Zheng suddenly felt that this so-called nothingness seemed to be much more lively than he had imagined. If he had time, he might really want to wander around in this strange place. But then he remembered the letter left by Liu Qiushan. This was really a coincidence, so coincidental that Lin Zheng couldn't even believe it. But if you think about it carefully, it seems reasonable. After all, this is nothingness, the opposite of objective reality, and all disappeared things should be here. He stared at the wrecked starship in a daze, then looked outside at the satellites and spacecraft in a daze. You are thinking about how to transmit these technologies back to the main material world, right? The voice of the technology core sounded in his ears. Well, but it seems that there is no way at the moment. Lin Zheng sighed. If I downgrade and return to the main material world, I will also be affected by endless annihilation. Please don't forget that there is a close connection between you and Yueyang Tower. The power you exert in that place is far greater than that in any other area. There are some things you cannot do in other places, but you can do them in Yueyang Tower. Lin Zheng's heart moved slightly, and he suddenly had an idea. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Liang Ke had just finished dealing with all the things at hand. Liu Qiushan's body had been cremated and placed in a small box waiting for his family to claim it. When handing the urn to the etiquette department, Liang Ke always found it difficult to get rid of the strange feeling of unreality. One of his colleagues left him so suddenly. He always felt that he should bear the main responsibility for this matter, but Liu Qiushan said that it was not anyone's fault, or it was right, and this was the ending that Liu Qiushan had been pushing for and heading towards. He shook his dizzy brain, sighed softly, and took the elevator down. He still has 4 hours of sleep, and after that he has a lot of things to do. He entered the elevator and pressed the only button in the elevator. With the sound of light and smooth operation, the entire elevator began to move downward. Liang Ke closed his eyes and did not open them until he heard a slight ding sound. He walked into his office, then suddenly froze in place when he saw a person. That should be a person. He was standing in front of the glass, silently gazing at the deep water. But there was actually nothing at that place, and Liang Ke saw nothing, but he was aware that there was a person there, and he could even see that person's movements and expressions. But it was actually empty, there was nothing. This person who could not be seen directly turned around, emitting a mysterious and cold aura that enveloped the entire room. What a strange existence this is. It's so strange that I can't even fully understand it. Isn't it said that Yueyang Tower will not have abnormalities? What's going on with this thing? But what shocked Liang Ke even more was that he was very calm. He seemed to be deprived of even the emotions of panic, anger, and vigilance. Some kind of powerful rationality controlled him, making him extremely calm, and even his thinking became more acute. Nice to meet you. I'm the director of the Endless Destruction Countermeasures Department of the Light Prism Bureau. I will help you fight against endless destructive destruction and help you travel to the universe. The voice of this non-existent person was distant and ethereal. Liang Ke stood there. He could clearly feel certain things constantly pouring into his mind. Suddenly, a concept emerged in his cognition, a concept outside the world, above the sky, macroscopic and boundless. He didn't know when this concept came to him, but it was as if some barrier was suddenly broken. After a while, he murmured, but the Light Prism Bureau doesn't even have an Endless Extinction Countermeasures Department. No, the Endless Annihilation Countermeasures Department has always existed, but you just haven't noticed it. From tomorrow on, everyone will be aware of the existence of this department, said the figure. But what does this department do? Explore the universe, explore humanity's escape. Can we escape? Liang Ke asked. Have no idea. But who are you? Umbra, you can call me Umbra. Next, Mr. Umbra, who could not even see, began to show Liang Ke some things that Liang Ke had never heard of or seen before. Liang Ke was very clear-headed throughout the whole process. He could feel a kind of sober terror, and the knowledge that he should not have known kept entering his mind. He wanted to go crazy and be terrified, but his mind was incredibly calm. He realized that humans once had an entire fleet at some point in time, but this entire fleet was wiped out by the endless destruction. He finally understood what his colleague Liu Qiushan had been struggling with over the years, and he saw some extremely despairing things. It was unknown how long it had been, but Liang Qu's body trembled slightly, and he seemed to have suddenly woken up. He was sitting on a chair, and the room was empty except him. He looked at the messy words he had written on the table. The head of the Countermeasures Department for Endless Extinction, Mr. Umakage. The fate of mankind is linked. Liu Qiushan. Investment of funds and technology. Everyone believes in the existence of the Deep Endless Extinction Countermeasures Department and Mr. Umbra. On the 15th of every month, the Endless Extinction Countermeasures Department holds a regular meeting. His brain was aching slightly and his thoughts were confused. He felt as if he had come into contact with something horrible, but he had forgotten it and could not remember it. Chapter 91. The logic of Umbra's existence is the most illogical. It is not one of Lin Zheng's clones, but a thing created directly by Lin Zheng. Its essence is similar to the void rectification protocol. He wrote on the paper, there is a staff member in Yueyang Tower codenamed Umbra, which is the shadow cast by the visitor on Yueyang Tower. Then the Umbra was created at Yueyang Tower. However, the Umbra can only appear in Yueyang Tower, and it can only appear when there is an entity of its own providing an observation perspective at Yueyang Tower. This identity is a tool used by Lin Zheng to guide the Prism Bureau in extraterrestrial exploration. He also wanted to know why endless extinction blocked deep space, and whether humans could escape from this bizarre world. Back in his small room, Lin Zheng had already gotten used to the biting cold and numbness. He opened his eyes and began to reassess his current situation. Lin Zheng, war, Umbra, and a preservation measure. Lin Zheng is his main body, the core part of him in the main material world. He is also a hero who has saved the city and can even get discounts when buying vegetables in the supermarket. The purpose of war is to create pressure, which will exist for a long time and ensure that things develop in the direction you want. Umbra, Mr. Umbra has an important mission, but at this moment Lin Zheng can no longer remember what the most important mission is. However, it doesn't matter. He will summon Umbra every once in a while. And his current goal? Continue investigating Yongning Night. Continue to search for the fourth definition that can break through the eternal night. And there is Mr. Umbra's important mission. Things are piling up more and more, but there has been no progress so far. It turns out that the power of the Prism Bureau is still needed. Lin Zheng leaned back on the sofa and breathed a sigh of relief. He glanced at the time and it was almost 3 o'clock in the evening. Although he no longer needed to rest, his mind was still a little confused after being hit by so many bizarre things these days, and he began to feel a little sleepy. Why not go home tonight? But will that disturb Xiaobai's rest? Lin Zheng thought. He stood up and looked out the window. Yueyang Tower was still awake. 4 or 5 huge ferries were slowly moving across the lake. Many speedboats and jet skis were surrounding the big ships. Shouting sounds could be heard from afar, and the lake was brightly illuminated by searchlights. After experiencing this sudden upheaval, they must re-inventory all the anomalies contained in Yueyang Tower. This is a huge project, but someone still has to do it. Lin Zheng took one last look at the busy ships before his figure disappeared from the window without any warning. The location of the transmission is not 100% accurate, but the error is often very small. This time he was teleported to the second floor of the villa. At this moment, the villa was silent and dark, without a sound, except for the wind blowing in through the huge gap that was still under construction. Well, it seems that this repair will indeed cost a lot of money. Fortunately, my wife is a rich woman. Lin Zheng suddenly remembered that he had no salary at all during the few days since he came back, and he was just a gigolo. But soft food is so delicious. Especially soft food from a pretty little rich woman. Lin Zheng cautiously came to the door of Bai Qingxiu's bedroom, hesitating whether to go in. After all, it was already 3 o'clock in the middle of the night. Would it disturb the girl's rest? After thinking for a while, he took out the key and quietly opened the door. The bed was clean and the quilt was neatly folded. Bai Qingxiu was sleeping soundly on the table. Seeing this scene, Lin Zheng felt a little guilty for no reason. He didn't know what habit this girl had developed. She would feel sleepy early when he was at home, and would stay up late when he was not at home. Although staying up late is not harmful to her health, Lin Zheng still feels a little distressed when he sees how hard she works. He still hoped that Bai Qingxiu could relax and be a little more heartless. Lin Zheng approached carefully, then picked up Bai Qingxiu and walked towards the bed. The woman woke up dazedly, looked at him sleepily, then put her arms around his neck and mumbled, "You're back, wait a minute, I'll go make you something to eat." Although she said this, she did not put it into practice. Instead, she put her face on Lin Zheng's chest and her eyelids closed unconsciously again. Lin Zheng thought that she was probably cooking 3 dishes and a soup in her dream. "Don't stay up late to work anymore, do you hear me?" Lin Zheng scolded her in a low voice. "I don't have a job. I'm just watching a TV series." The woman muttered softly in a half-asleep state, her cheeks red, which made her look a little cute. Lin Zheng turned around and took a look at the mess on the table, including various incident investigation reports from the research center and the company, research materials provided by the Qinghe Research Institute, and things from the Abnormal Affairs Bureau. He shook his head and stuffed Bai Qingxiu into the quilt. After thinking for a while, he decided to go in. However, as soon as he got in, he was immediately entangled tightly by this woman with her hands and feet, and he was squeezed to the edge of the narrow bed again. "I'm back to that warm and comfortable state where I don't have to think about anything." This state makes Lin Zheng very comfortable. Lin Zheng suddenly remembered his conversation with the technical core in the void. In fact, he talked a lot with the technical core, and the technical core also told him a lot of things. He asked the technical core, "How can we stabilize the created world in the void?" The technical core replied, "Make nothingness a part of you. When you are everywhere in nothingness, it means that you are looking at every part of nothingness and will never take your attention away." Lin Zheng asked, "Can I do it?" The technical core replied, "It is very simple for you. You can do it anytime you want, as long as you are willing to associate yourself with nothingness through self-definition, but I don't recommend you to do so." "Why, what are the consequences if I do it?" "You will die. Technically speaking, you will become a god. You will become nothingness itself, becoming infinitely large. Your thoughts and cognition will become the natural laws that drive the development and evolution of nothingness. But you can no longer think." "Why?" Lin Zheng asked. "Because you can no longer get any information from the outside as a starting point for thinking, because there is no outside for you anymore, you are the universe, life, and everything, all of which are part of you. As a result of the development and changes you promote, there will be no surprises, no accidents, and nothing will be able to make you react. Every second, every frame, every wave of change in the world is the result of your promotion." Lin Zheng just sat there thinking, and as he thought he realized something, which meant that he would annihilate all emotions, annihilate his soul, annihilate all sensual things, and only leave the absolutely rational part. He will disappear. This didn't seem like the ending he wanted, but rather like what Eternal Night wanted him to become. Then Lin Zheng came to a conclusion from this obscure conversation, which is: you must not eat anything randomly. especially things that affect the brain. Chapter 92. After experiencing creation, Lin Zheng did not feel any pleasure as a creator, but instead felt a stronger sense of belonging to the main material world. In fact, this state may be the best for him. Of course it's still a little uncomfortable. For example, he is being strangled and feeling uncomfortable now. Why is this woman so clingy? Can she sleep a little closer to the middle? Is the space behind her really reserved for the tank? He began to try to push Bai Qingxiu away, but he really couldn't push her away even a little bit. After all, this woman was a superhuman, and superhuman abilities were the direction of physical evolution. Although he looks delicate and tender, he is actually a neck all over his body. After finally pushing the woman away a little bit, he didn't even have time to take a few breaths of fresh air before his neck was suddenly wrapped around by Bai Qingxiu's delicate hands again. Before Lin Zheng could react, his entire head was suddenly pressed into Bai Qingxiu's arms. His brain suddenly went blank, softness, sweetness, high temperature, and a suffocating feeling. In an instant, his entire perception became very wrong. It seemed as if something suddenly surged in his chest. He subconsciously wanted to escape, but his neck was held tightly and he fell deeper and deeper. Don't move around, sleep well. He heard Bai Qingxiu's voice, which was obviously lazy and tired. This woman is really... He grabbed Bai Qingxiu's wrist, struggled to get rid of the restraint, and said with a bit of ferocity, Bai Qingxiu, are you not going to sleep tonight? Maybe it was because she saw her fierce expression that this usually noisy woman finally seemed a little scared. She looked at Lin Zheng timidly. Under normal circumstances, her appearance would really make Lin Zheng feel distressed, but at this moment, Lin Zheng felt a completely different emotion in his heart, an emotion that was even more uncontrollable. Without any rational thinking, Lin Zheng kissed her fiercely and roughly. After a brief 2 seconds of resistance, Bai Qingxiu turned into a gentle response, and then this response became more profound. For a long time, Lin Zheng thought that there was probably nothing in the world that could destroy his rationality. But strangely enough, Bai Qingxiu still did it easily. He quickly became familiar with this woman's style. She was soft yet tough, not very proactive, but definitely not someone who could get away easily either. The warmth, fragrance, and slight trembling easily stirred Lin Zheng's nerves. In short, they fit in very well, and it seemed that they could understand each other's minds and habits without any trial and error. The whole process was very comfortable. This sense of fit continued until the end of the process. He supported his body with one hand. Bai Qingxiu curled up there intoxicated and weakly, her hot cheek pressed against the palm of his hand, her face full of fatigue. Is this the end? Her voice was soft and weak. Well, this is just a small lesson. Have a good rest. Lin Zheng gently reached out and played with the woman's hair. But at this moment, he suddenly saw a hint of cunning in Bai Qingxiu's eyes, and a bad feeling suddenly rose in his heart. Then, a slender arm slowly wrapped around his waist and tightened, and Bai Qingxiu's voice sounded from behind him, then the second round is about to begin. Lin Zheng felt his hair stand on end instantly. He forgot that the ability this woman gained from the dual-dimensional extraordinary was a clone. Wait a minute, today, not today. Before Lin Zheng could finish his words, his mouth was covered roughly. It's useless. You asked for this. If you touch me, you will have to bear the consequences. Bai Qingxiu whispered in his ear. The voice was gentle but with a hint of chill. He suddenly realized that he had been deceived, completely deceived by this female hooligan. The tenderness and harmony just now were completely gone, replaced by a more ferocious and violent style, as if it was a python devouring its prey. There is no room for maneuver and no chance of escape. Surrounded by the two Bai Qingxiu, let alone protesting, even breathing depended on the mood of this woman. She is really the kind of BD who wants to take both the person's life and the person's life. When the sun rose, Lin Zheng lay on Bai Qingxiu's thighs. He felt weak all over, especially his waist, which seemed to have been broken into pieces. Bai Qingxiu was happily watching the drama while she used one hand to stroke Lin Zheng's chin, as if she was teasing a cat. You were a little too harsh. Lin Zheng felt his waist crack again. Humph, you're asking for trouble. Don't forget who took the initiative last night. The woman smiled. But it was you who seduced me first. Who told you to get into my bed? The things in my bed are mine. Lin Zheng sighed quietly. This woman was unmatched in her ability to make arguments. Well, don't do this next time. You have to pay attention to my health. Okay, okay, I won't dare to do that next time. This woman had the word perfunctory written all over her face, and Lin Zheng didn't even have to guess what she was thinking. He just felt his head buzzing, and he really had no way to deal with this woman. Are things at the Prism Bureau very troublesome? Bai Qingxiu suddenly asked. Well, Liu Qiushan died, and then some things happened that were beyond my imagination. Lin Zheng said in a low voice, looking at Bai Qingxiu's smooth neck and chin. If one day you don't want to deal with all this mess anymore, we'll leave Qinghe and find a smaller city to live in, and I'll make money to support you. The woman said seriously. Well, thank my rich lady for the food, but I can't feel at ease unless I get rid of some things. Lin Zheng reached out and pinched her cheek. Although today was the meeting date that Lin Zheng and Liang Ke had agreed on, Lin Zheng finally postponed the date. For the entire morning, he had been watching TV series with Bai Qingxiu. Bai Qingxiu snuggled in his arms and gave him pointers, saying how good this character was and how good that person was. The two of them didn't have breakfast and ordered takeout for lunch. After lunch, they lay in the living room and played games until the evening, then cooked together. That night, Bai Qingxiu did not stay up late to watch TV series or work. She leaned against Lin Zheng, tossed and turned for a while, and then fell asleep. It's this sleeping posture, Lin Zheng has basically given up on correcting her and just lets her be. Chapter 93. Snow was flying in the endless radiator. An old man was standing on the roof, repairing his house with some effort. His small wooden house had many holes in it and the walls were broken by the huge ice blocks. It wasn't easy to find materials here, but he still found some. He looked back at the endless ice field. The ice field used to have some ups and downs, but the ups and downs were not very large. At this moment, the entire ice field has been torn into pieces. In some places, narrow and deep canyons have been torn out, and in some places, continuous icebergs have been raised due to the impact. And everywhere within sight, you can see towering icicles, like a vast transparent forest of trees. When an icicle collapses in a violent wind, it sets off a chain reaction in which pieces collide with each other and fall down in pieces, eventually turning into a rainstorm of giant ice blocks. They fell from the sky with a force greater than that of a cannonball, enough to create a huge hole in the iceberg. And all of this was due to the emergency cooling that took place more than 10 hours, or perhaps dozens of hours ago. He has lived here for many years, and he doesn't know how long ago he last saw such a large-scale heat dissipation. He knows what this means. This means that the main material world has once again undergone tremendous changes. I don't know how long it took, but the light ball in the room slowly changed from scarlet to light white, returning to a stable state that allowed normal communication. Before the light ball made any sound, the old man asked, "Is fantasy-level technology appearing in the main material world again? Deep space technology has been unlocked." The light ball replied. The old man frowned slightly, and he kicked a large piece of ice off the roof, making a loud bang. He said, "This shouldn't happen. Deep space technology is not a fantasy technology. It shouldn't have such a big impact." He suddenly stopped talking halfway, looked at the light ball with a serious look and said, "Has the blockade of endless annihilation been broken? Has mankind recognized the existence of the universe? No, it's not broken. Wait, so they bypassed the endless destruction and developed deep space technology? To what extent? Perfect interstellar travel has been witnessed by some humans. There's no reasonable technology advancement curve? They don't even start with theoretical knowledge. No, it was witnessed directly." The old man's Adam's apple rolled up and down involuntarily, and he slowly said, "What do you mean? Are you going to tell me that humans accidentally built a starship when they were researching microwave ovens, and then they thought it couldn't be used to heat up leftovers, so they threw it away? Or are you going to tell me that Mother Nature somehow managed to grow a starship out of the ground, and it just happened to be seen by a few tourists?" The light of the ball of light flickered, but it did not respond to the old man's sarcastic and mocking remarks. After a moment it said, "If knowledge of the universe begins to spread in the world, it could have serious consequences. Could it be related to the strange life before? It's still unclear and we need to conduct further investigation. Does this matter require our intervention?" The light inside the light ball circulated, and after a moment of silence, it replied, "Yes, we need to intervene. We need to restore everything to normal, to the state it should be in. Find the singularity that breaks through endless consumption, find the source of deep space technology, and then destroy them." In the Yueyang Tower, Liang Qi's office was filled with darkness and the lights were dim. Liang Qi looked at Lin Zheng and Bai Qingxiu in front of him. He knew Bai Qingxiu and was quite familiar with her background, most of which was told to him by Liu Qian. This woman was once the most powerful supernatural being in Qinghe City and even in the entire Three River Basin. Although she was not a completely official supernatural being, she was the one who solved 8 out of 10 serious abnormal incidents in Qinghe City. Although with the arrival of the Prism Bureau and the influx of extraordinary people, she is no longer the strongest, but her strength is still very reliable. More importantly, she is also one of the first dual-dimensional extraordinary people. After the elephant incident, this group of dual-dimensional extraordinary people attracted the attention of the entire extraordinary world, and the Prism Bureau was also paying attention. For the Prism Bureau, the fact that bidimensionalization makes the extraordinary people's abilities stronger is secondary. What is more important is that it allows the extraordinary people to withstand higher levels of mutation. Externalization rate is currently the most standard indicator for measuring extraordinary people, but it does not measure strength, but the human nature of extraordinary people. When the externalization rate exceeds 50%, it is difficult to be regarded as a traditional human being. When it reaches 70%, there is a considerable risk of getting out of control. There was once an incident in the Western Federation where 60% of the extraordinary people went out of control. They turned an entire town into an alien space. 30,000 people were swallowed up by the alien space and transformed into twisted monsters, while they themselves completely disappeared. To this day, the Western Federation has not been able to resolve the impact he caused and can only tightly blockade the town. But the situation is completely different for dual-dimensional transcendence. Take Bai Qingxiu for example. Her ability to clone herself is not actually an ability but a state of out of control. But she uses this ability with ease. Even in a completely split state, she can still think, observe, and act normally, and it has no effect on her personality. Feng Miguang said that during the period when this girl was depressed, she played badminton by herself to relax. When I am busy at work, I can cook and work at the same time. When I'm under a lot of work pressure, I can even have a quarrel with myself. In short, there is a strange kind of madness in his stable mental state. Well, with Miss Bai's ability and background, she can join the team to deal with visitor abuse. Before Liang Qi finished speaking, Lin Zheng said, No, I mean that regardless of her personal ability, I want to get her in based on my relationship. After all, she's working hard out there, and I want to find her a job with a regular job where she can slack off. Liang Qi took a breath and said, What I mean is, given Miss Bai's ability and background. I know she may not be qualified in terms of ability, but Mr. Liang, please be flexible. After all, she is my wife. Liang Qi slammed the table and said with gritted teeth, with Miss Bai's ability and background, it is more than enough for her to join the visitor abuse countermeasures team. Can you please listen to what I have to say? Lin Zheng shrank his head and immediately became obedient. When Bai Qingxiu saw her boyfriend being humiliated, she hugged his arm and laughed. Liang Qi just felt that his nerves were throbbing because of the torture of this young couple. Chapter 94. In short, Lin Zheng, you should know that the core mission of the visitor abuse countermeasures team is only one, and that is to make you stronger, the stronger the better, and your ability must exceed that of war. Liang Qi said, rubbing his forehead. Is there any news about the war recently? Lin Zheng asked. As soon as he asked this question, Bai Qingxiu immediately became serious, sitting upright next to Lin Zheng, looking particularly concerned. Seeing that the two kids were so concerned about the war, Liang Qi even felt a little ashamed for a moment. We have been trying to track them secretly, and there have been several eyewitness records, but you should know how difficult it is to track a person with the ability to teleport. He sighed and said, and if the war can summon visitors, even if we can deal with him, it will cost a huge price. We have to deprive him of the summoning authority first. So our focus must be on safely increasing your externalization rate to make you stronger. We have some means of strengthening your mental power. Do you want to try them? Lin Zheng shook his head and said, I'm afraid strengthening my spiritual power won't work on me. The mechanism for deepening a visitor's involvement doesn't work that way. Then do you have any solution? Liang Qi asked with his hands crossed and his chin supported. Contact with anomalies, and then gain understanding and cognition. And it must be contact with high-level anomalies. The reason why I was able to survive was because of the contact with the elephant. Lin Zheng's words were half true and half false. He hoped to contact the anomaly not to become stronger, but to find the fourth definition that could break through the eternal night. But he can indeed become stronger through definition. But he didn't plan to eat everything. Eating everything would not only be of no benefit, but might even have negative effects. And even though he believed that there was no upper limit to the definition, he still had to remain vigilant and try his best to maximize the benefits of each promotion. After all, it was still unknown how strong his enemies were. After the Yueyang Tower incident, although Lin Zheng had a new understanding of himself, he also had a deeper understanding of his opponent. He can stir up the underlying logic of the world, but the other party can do it too. Moreover, although Chen Yuxi looks like a human, even the Prism Bureau cannot find any information about him. From this point of view, Yongning Knight is probably not an easy organization to deal with. Your condition is simple but also difficult, because we are generally unable to contain anomalies of particularly high levels, so our main focus is to control and reduce the disasters, Liang Ke said. Take elephants for example. We have more than 10 emergency plans for disasters caused by elephants. When he said this, he seemed to remember the things in Jianglan City again. It's a pity that the incident in Jianglan City was too weird. The use of dual-dimensional extraordinary beings as materials also increased the aggressiveness of the elephants. Well, let's not talk about that for now, let's talk about the current issue first. Lin Zheng brought the topic back. Liang Ke was silent for a while and said, "It's all fine. Human resources, material resources, and rite of passage. Except that we can't actively help you cause a disaster, the Prism Bureau will meet all your conditions." No. I should say that the whole world will try its best to meet your conditions. In addition, we will also mobilize the intelligence department to search for the organization called Yongning Knight and Chen Yuxi that you mentioned. Liang Q's words immediately made Lin Zheng feel relieved. This was the result he wanted. He mobilized the entire Guangling Bureau's manpower and material resources to fight against Yongning Knight. Moreover, Liang Ke said that the whole world would satisfy his requirements. He believed that even if Liang Ke could not do it, he should be able to achieve 60% to 70% of it. After all, as an official organization, the Prism Bureau has a high level of influence and trust in the world. But at this moment, a distant roar suddenly sounded in the small office, and the glass wall in the deep water vibrated buzzingly, and at the same time the deep water became turbid at a speed visible to the naked eye. The room became increasingly darker. The lanterns floating in the deep water were obscured by the turbidity, becoming dim points of light one after another. The entire room was becoming dark and ominous. What happened? Bai Qingxiu stood up and asked. Lin Zheng and Liang Ke exchanged glances, and they realized something almost at the same time. The weather at Yueyang Tower has changed, and this time the change is so drastic that it is abnormal. Liang Ke immediately opened his work computer, and Lin Zheng hurried over. Liang Q's computer was connected to many terminals in Yueyang Tower, including the Hazard Situation Forecast System of the Meteorological Center. Plague, 7% Destructive Anomaly Invasion, 11% Hazardous Mimetic Spread, 2% War, 90%. 90%. This bright red number appeared so abruptly on the prediction screen with a dark blue-black tone as the main color, which seemed a bit glaring. What the hell is going on? This was the second time Lin Zheng heard Liang Ke swear. The first time was when Yueyang Tower was thrown into nothingness. This was the first time that Lin Zheng truly saw Yueyang Tower in its extremely horrible negative state. The wind howled, the waves surged, the sun and stars faded, and the mountains loomed. It was sunny when we arrived, but now the whole Yueyang Tower is as gloomy as night. Violent winds raged and rain fell wildly. The trees on the street were bent into bows in the strong wind and some trees were severely broken. Above Dongting Lake, huge waves rolled and surged, crashing into the river bank like ferocious beasts. More than a dozen huge water tornadoes rushed high into the clouds above the water. At this moment, the Yueyang Tower Meteorological Center was already in complete chaos, and the meteorological hall and display screens were crowded with people. Everyone had an expression of disbelief and horror on their face, and they were trying their best to contact all external organizations they could. How could war possibly happen in this age when war has been completely banished from the human world? What kind of war? Who is fighting against whom? What scale of war? The most important thing is whether the extraordinary people will be involved in the war. You must know that some powerful extraordinary people have a killing power that is even greater than that of the army. One person can dominate the direction of the war. Liang Ke and Lin Zheng shouted at the top of their lungs as soon as they entered the gate of the meteorological center, "What's going on? Can someone tell me what's going on? Information Center, where are the people from the Information Center? The minister of the Information Center squeezed out of the crowd with difficulty. At this moment, he was sweating profusely and said, "We are already investigating. We have sent inquiry letters to the official supernatural organizations and alliances in 13 countries. Sending them a letter of inquiry is useless. We should contact them to rectify the agreement and warn them of the risk of war." Liang Ke roared. The Minister of Information looked at him with a panicked look in his eyes, but the problem seems to be with the rectification protocol. Those 13 official supernatural organizations all said that they can no longer contact the rectification protocol. The rectification agreement seems to have disappeared. The rectification protocol disappeared, and the most powerful force in human history disappeared without any warning. At this moment, everyone looked up at the Scarlet War probability percentage. 90%. Then they all realized it. War, the demon sealed by the purification agreement, is really coming. Back. Chapter 95. The Endless Extinction Countermeasures Department became one of the most expensive departments in Yueyang Tower in just 2 months. After only one meeting, the funding it requested was almost 2/3 of that of the Technical Development Department. Liang Ke always said that this was as it should be. After all, that department was fighting against the endless consumption of SSS-level anomalies, so it was normal to spend money. But when someone asked him what he was doing specifically, Liang Ke always remained silent. But what's even more bizarre is that no one knows where the Endless Destruction Countermeasures Department is, not even Liang Ke, the boss of Yueyang Tower. This strange situation would certainly attract the attention of other Yueyang Tower staff, especially those in the audit department. Some people even believe that bureaucratic style has spread to this holy land of human scientific research, and the so-called Mr. Umbra is just an identity for some people to make money. But on the 15th, the regular meeting notice submitted by Mr. Benying would appear on Liang Q's desk, and then a dozen scholars would rush to somewhere for the meeting. After the meeting, if you ask any participant, they all say that they are planning a major event that concerns the fate of mankind. When asked about the specific content, no one said anything and no one knew. When asked if they had seen Mr. Benying, they all said they had. When asked what Mr. Benying looked like, they still didn't say a word. So everyone seemed to be caught in a strange situation. Mr. Umakage has become an urban legend of Yueyang Tower, just like Hanako in the toilet or Hakashaku-sama. Everyone says it's awesome and scary, but no one has ever seen it. At this moment, the second regular meeting of the Endless Destruction Countermeasures Department was being held, and everything was still led by Liang Ke. He and a dozen scholars stood in a dark and deep space with no walls or floors, but tables were still visible, piled with thick materials. Mr. Umbra, the most mysterious existence in Yueyang Tower, is showing them something that is completely beyond their cognition. There were spacecraft of various types and levels, huge starships, and some buildings they had never seen before, which were ground bases for launching rockets. In this dark room, they could finally recall and talk freely about the universe. They discussed the materials of spacecraft, various heat-resistant alloys, graphite fibers, ablative materials, space engines, and how to break through the first cosmic speed, and how to observe their world from space orbit. During the whole process, Mr. Benying just stood there, watching everyone silently. Everyone could feel a deep and heavy pressure from Mr. Benying. "Mr. Umbra, I want to know why we can't just copy the starship? Instead, we have to start with the smallest manned spacecraft." Liang Ke asked cautiously. Mr. Benying did not answer, he just looked at Liang Ke, which made Liang Ke feel panic for no reason. He was actually very afraid of Mr. Benying, not because of the fear of physical force, but because he was afraid that the other party would be disappointed or impatient with them, and he was afraid that there would not be another regular meeting of the Endless Extermination Countermeasures Department. "I don't mean to compete, I just..." Liang Ke hurriedly tried to explain. "Let's start with the simple ones," Mr. Umakage replied. Liang Ke didn't dare to ask any more questions. He realized that Mr. Benying had no intention of telling him his thoughts and strategies. He must have some long-term plans. But in fact, at this moment, Mr. Benying was also a little nervous. He couldn't join in the discussion. After all, he knew nothing about this knowledge. All he did was use his spiritual realm to completely reproduce the scene he saw in the void. In comparison, he felt that these scientists were truly amazing. Although they had their own mental powers to assist them in their thinking, their observation and judgment abilities were also astonishing. For example, the material properties and processing technology can be judged by the color and shape of the metal, and the function of the instrument can be judged by the text, appearance, and display of the instrument. If it happened to him, he would only feel that there was a piece of iron here and a monitor there. Pay attention to the logic of your writing. Mr. Benning reminded in a low voice. The logic of the writing is that when writing written materials, any statements about deep space must be completely avoided. No one may directly mention anything about deep space in the text, nor may anyone be led to any associations with deep space. Everyone should make sure they forget everything in the room after they leave it. After an unknown amount of time, Mr. Umakich's calm voice sounded again, "It's almost time." "Mr. Benning, can we wait a moment?" A scholar was about to speak when he saw Mr. Benning slowly shaking his head. He sighed softly and said nothing more. After all, this was what Mr. Benning had stipulated at the beginning. The maximum duration of each regular meeting was 6 hours. Their goal was to understand the principles and methods of the spacecraft as much as possible within 6 hours. They also worked under the deadline during the first regular meeting, and it was the same this time. "If possible, I will increase the frequency of regular meetings." Mr. Umakich said slowly, "Everyone, prepare to save the files." Everyone present quietly moved their stools and sat together. Everyone closed their eyes and tried to relax as much as possible. "Save the files," Mr. Umbra said, and this time his voice seemed long and distant. When they opened their eyes again, they were standing in the corridor of the Yueyang Tower Science and Technology Research and Development Center. There were empty offices and seminar rooms on both sides, but no one remembered which room they came out of. Liang Ke looked at the memo in his hand. All the handwriting on it was left by him, but he had no impression of it. He only knew that this matter was related to the Endless Annihilation Countermeasures Department. Judging from the records in the memo, he seems to have a lot of money to spend and a lot of things to do. After dissipating his own shadow, Lin Zheng sat up straight on the sofa and stretched out his body. Bai Qingxiu was sitting opposite him, holding a cup of hot tea in both hands and blowing on it in small sips, then she handed the hot tea over to him. "When did you come back?" Lin Zheng asked as he took the tea. "I came back an hour ago and saw you rolling your eyes on the sofa. I thought you were doing something weird, so I didn't dare disturb you. No wonder my eyes hurt so much, it turns out I rolled my eyes for 6 hours. Lin Zheng took a sip of tea and asked, "Is there any new information from the intelligence department?" "As for the intelligence department," Bai Qingxiu said, crossing her arms over her chest, "it's basically useless." Lin Zheng was not surprised, the destruction of Yueyang Tower's intelligence department was completely within his expectations. He looked out the window and saw strong winds and thunder and lightning. It had been 2 whole months and there had not been a single sunny day in Yueyang Tower. Chapter 96. After the rectification agreement disappeared, the first department in Dongzhou to be hit was the intelligence department. 12 hours after the disappearance of the purge agreement was confirmed, 16 international intelligence channels of the Prism Bureau had failed. Although these intelligence lines were not actually cut off, those countries began to refuse to share intelligence or even conveyed false intelligence. It seems that people's desire to share has disappeared along with the disappearance of the rectification agreement. The world's extraordinary scientific research system was then hit, and many countries began to recall their overseas scientific researchers. However, this incident has little impact on Dongzhou. After all, Yueyang Tower is in Dongzhou, and the visitors-related research is also in Dongzhou. Instead, the Prism Bureau began to consciously expel a group of people from Yueyang Tower, because since the loss of contact with the rectification agreement, confidential intelligence leaks have occurred in Yueyang Tower more than once. Although more than half of them have been intercepted, it is still unknown how much has leaked out. Around the beginning of this month, the shadow of war returned to this world, and the first place where the war broke out was the northern continent. Unlike the huge size of East Continent and West Continent, the northern continent is about 1.5 times the size of East Continent, but it is home to dozens of countries. The land there is barren, there are not many survival resources, they are unevenly distributed, and productivity is relatively backward. Before the rectification agreement came out, it was a land of frequent wars. When the rectification agreement existed, the northern continent established the Continental Joint Consultation Body to communicate with the rectification agreement as a whole. But after the rectification agreement disappeared, the functions of the association were paralyzed almost instantly. The cause was an armed standoff between 2 small countries over a batch of lost chemical resources. The situation was not serious at first. After all, no one knew whether the rectification agreement would be revived, so no one dared to cross the red line easily. But until an extraordinary person detonated extraordinary power in the center of the confrontation zone, the rolling poisonous fog instantly engulfed the border between the two countries, not only causing the deaths of a large number of armed personnel, but also many civilians were involved, and strange diseases began to spread. Then the mediation of the consortium became ineffective and even became a target. Because the extraordinary power that erupted in the center of the battlefield was exactly the parasite mist, one of the extraordinary training technologies that the Federation purchased from Ryan Technology, an extraordinary training company in the Western Federation several years ago. After the incident, the Western Federation's official supernatural organization Castle of Hope immediately launched an inquiry into Ryan Technology, but Ryan Technology stated that they had discontinued using this immature technology system several years ago. Originally, Hopeberg wanted to conduct a further investigation into Ryan Technology, but was ultimately rejected on the grounds that it involved commercial secrets. This has always been the case in the Western Federation. Due to the independence of each city-state, work in Castle Hope is difficult to carry out. Companies are the strongest force there. They are united, fierce and aggressive. They have their own armed forces, technology to cultivate extraordinary beings, and are ambitious and greedy. On the day that Castle of Hope proposed to investigate Ryan Technology, more than a dozen companies questioned the legitimacy of Castle of Hope's investigation, which ultimately led to the investigation being shelved. All in all, this incident led to two results. The first was that the United Association, which was known as the negotiation table of the Northern Continent, collapsed, and the thunder of war descended on the Northern Continent. The second is that the whole world has realized one thing, that is, the purification agreement has really left, perhaps because they are tired of protecting humans, or perhaps for some other reason. In short, since that day, the war prediction for Dongzhou has increased to 94%. As for what will happen after Dongzhou is involved in the war, no one knows. Just as Lin Zheng was reading the incident report, there was a knock on the office door, and Liang Ke poked his head in from outside with a tired but excited look. "Oh, team leader Lin is busy." He forced a smile. "Not really busy. I should say I've been too idle recently," Lin Zheng said, leaning back on the sofa. Liang Ke walked in, sat down on another single sofa, and said with a long sigh, "Alas, there is nothing we can do about it. In peacetime, our intelligence network can cover the entire world, and we have more than enough manpower, but now we are extremely short of manpower. We have started to cooperate with the company now. You know, those guys are not just looking to make money. They have too many calculations in their minds. And there is also SSS-009-1 created by the visitors. That matter has been very troublesome recently. SSS-009-1, bidimensional frame, which are the white molds made by Lin Zheng. There are now 6 organizations that have mastered the technology to create two-dimensional transcendence using a two-dimensional framework. Because this technology is so simple, as long as the two-dimensional framework is ensured to be absolutely still and integrated with the transcendent, directional transcendence can be achieved. The two-dimensional superhumans born under this technology are called the second generation. Although their amplification and growth are not as good as the first generation directly selected by the visitors, it is enough to arouse the enthusiasm of the superhuman organizations. Well, this is the situation now. I'm afraid it's really difficult to fulfill the promise I made to you before." Liang Ke took out a cigarette from his arms with some annoyance. He put the cigarette in his mouth and began to daydream again. After being in a daze for a while, his eyes suddenly lit up and he said, "I suddenly thought of a person, a very unfathomable person, who can definitely help you. But it's not easy to meet that gentleman. He has strange habits and a rather withdrawn personality." "Who? Is there such a person in Yueyang Tower?" Lin Zheng was curious. Liang Ke put his arms down, sat up straight and said, "The director of the Endless Extinction Countermeasures Department, his real name is unknown, codenamed Benying, we all call him Mr. Benying." Mr. Umbra. Bai Kingsu beside him also showed a trace of curiosity and said, "I've heard this name a lot recently. He seems to be a very powerful guy." Liang Ke nodded and said, "He is more than amazing. If you are lucky enough to attend one of Mr. Benying's regular meetings, you will understand that he is probably on the same level as the director." Lin Zheng's mouth twitched and he said, "Forget it. I've heard of that guy, but I don't like him very much." "Why?" Liang Ke asked curiously. "Yeah, because my eyes hurt." Lin Zheng pressed his eye sockets. Liang Ke was a little confused and looked at Lin Zheng with a puzzled look. Oh, by the way, does Director of the Prism Bureau know about Mr. Benying's matter? Lin Zheng suddenly thought of this question. The Director of the Prism Bureau, the highest decision-maker of the Prism Bureau, seems to be particularly low-key. Lin Zheng has never met him. After the Void incident, Liang Ke sent an incident report to the Director, and the only feedback he received was the 4 big words already aware. Oh, the Director has known about this for a long time. He said that Mr. Benying is his friend and has already issued a letter of authorization. Liang Ke said. Lin Zheng couldn't help but be stunned. Chapter 97. Director of the Light Prism Bureau, what kind of person is he? Lin Zheng suddenly became curious. I don't know. I've never seen him. But he is one of the saviors like Lao Lu. I think you should know about the 9 saviors. Although their methods and ideas are different, they are all considered to have the possibility of saving the world. The Director is one of them. What's his direction? He thinks our world is not real, Liang Ke said. Lin Zheng was not surprised. As a time traveler, when faced with such a bizarre world, it was easy for him to question the authenticity of this world. In fact, 2 of the 9 saviors believe that the world is not real, but they also have differences between them. For example, if the world is not real, then are we real? Is our history real? Liang Ke continued. After that, he looked at Lin Zheng with interest and said, what do you think about this issue? Lin Zheng shook his head and said, it doesn't matter which one it is. We have to survive no matter which one it is. Liang Ke nodded in approval, yes, no matter what we are, even if we are really just a brain in a jar, just a string of code, even if we are actually bacteria in the toenail mud of some super invincible monster, we must survive. This metaphor really doesn't sound like something you would use, said Lin Zheng. Liang Ke looked up at the ceiling and suddenly fell silent for unknown reasons. After a while he said, forget it, let's stop chatting and get down to business. I reported the dilemma we are facing to the Director, and he gave me a good plan and a bad plan, and told you to choose for yourself. Are you still so mysterious? He has always been like this, and likes to do some inexplicable little tricks. Liang Ke continued, in short, the best strategy is to wait patiently. We should continue to hold our troops in place until the war is over or the rectification agreement is returned. This is the safest and most reasonable way. What's the worst option? Lin Zheng asked. The worst option is for us to intervene in the war, using the power of the visitors to intervene in the war, to form a deterrent to the entire extraordinary world, so that they dare not fight, and by the way, to turn the world's attention back to the study of visitors. At this point, Liang Ke paused for a moment and then said, but I think you also know the disadvantages of doing this. Not only will this make your situation more dangerous, but your body may not be able to withstand frequent use of the visitor's power. In addition, we have to be careful of that guy who is also called war. So my suggestion is that you wait patiently. The Prism Bureau is already trying to organize war mediation. If progress is fast, the situation will be stabilized again in a year or 2. And maybe the rectification agreement will be back in a week or 2. Having said that, Liang Ke didn't say any more. After he conveyed the Director's instructions and his own suggestions, the next step was to give the choice to Lin Zheng. I can choose either one. Lin Zheng asked. The Director's instructions are that no matter what choice you make, we will fully assist you. Then I'll choose the worst option. Lin Zheng didn't hesitate at all. What Liang Ke said might be right. If the progress was fast, the situation could be stabilized in 1 or 2 years. But whether it was 1 or 2 years, it was too long for him. As for the return of the rectification agreement, he couldn't put his hopes on such an uncertain thing. Of course he knew that such a high-profile action would arouse hostility from many supernatural organizations and individuals, but he didn't care. Because of the national supernatural organizations and companies that he currently knows about, there are only a few that can pose a threat to him, even from the most optimistic perspective. After all, even if there is a powerful supernatural being who can kill him, it cannot threaten his essence. Killing him is not even a loss to him. What's more, he has the Prism Bureau as his backing and support, so he doesn't have to worry about technical support and personnel support. Well, the reason why I chose the best strategy is... Lin Zheng was about to make up a few reasons to explain when Liang Ke raised his hand to stop him. Liang Ke shook his head and said, you don't need to explain to me. The Director told me at the beginning. He said that although the best strategy is a wise move, you will most likely choose the worst strategy, so I was mentally prepared from the beginning. Did he tell you why? He said that because he thought the best strategy was boring, he thought you would think so too. Because of boredom? Lin Zheng was slightly startled, then began to reflect on himself, and finally quickly came to a conclusion. The best strategy is indeed a bit boring. Anyway, the director said, if you really choose the worst option, let me give this to you. Liang Ke opened the briefcase he carried with him, pulled out a thick stack of information and handed it over. Lin Zheng opened the information bag, half of which was in Esperanto and the other half in his native language. This was a record of communication between the Prism Bureau and the Alliance. The exchange was clearly private, the language was informal, it even contained occasional profanity and some slang, but its core content was simple. The United Nations' ability to constrain the northern continent is crumbling, and they believe that the northern continent may have been infiltrated by external forces. But they don't have the power to fight back, so they hope that the Light Prism Bureau can help them eliminate foreign forces in the name of war mediation. In return, they are willing to hand over an A-level anomaly, A055, the Book of the Sea Tower. Grade A, doesn't seem very impressive. Lin Zheng muttered to himself. Do you think everyone deals with S-class like you do every day? Besides, the Book of the Sea Tower is still very important to the United Association. You can think of it as a kind of magic book that can be used to perform some magic or rituals. Didn't you say that you want to become stronger by understanding and contacting anomalies? Maybe this is a good opportunity. Yeah, that's right. Lin Zheng nodded. Although the level is A, it is indeed a power system that he has never come into contact with. Maybe it can really give him some inspiration. When do we leave? Lin Zheng asked. As long as you are ready, we can set off. Also, I suggest you not bring Xiao Bai with you. I had no intention of going. Bai Qingxiu interrupted, I still have a lot of things to deal with, and I'm also the stone lion of Yueyang Tower. Ah? Stone lions. Nothing, just, a stone lion in the literal sense, to ward off disasters and evil spirits or something. Lin Zheng coughed twice. Simply put, Bai Qingxiu is one of his teleportation points. As long as Bai Qingxiu is in Yueyang Tower, he can teleport back to summon Mr. Benying to ensure the normal operation of the Endless Extinction Countermeasures Department. Chapter 98. A few days later, an official staff member of the Federation arrived at the Prism Bureau and hoped that the Prism Bureau would intervene in the war in the northern continent. The Prism Bureau politely stated that they were not in a position to get involved in the affairs of the northern continent, but were willing to send a delegation to mediate and end the war as soon as possible. But everyone knows that this is just a script. The real purpose of the Prism Bureau is to eliminate all external forces that attempt to start a war on the northern continent. There can be no so-called mediation unless we cut off the tentacles that extend from beyond the ocean. The day after the two sides reached an agreement, an unofficial news began to spread quickly, that is, the visitors' direct victims were also among the mediation delegation. The authenticity of this news has not yet been verified, but it has already made the entire supernatural world nervous. If the news is true, it means that an SSS-level abnormal force may descend on the battlefield of the northern continent. As a result, before the delegation set out, several small-scale mercenaries in the northern continent had already announced their disbandment, and some external forces voluntarily gave up their activities in the northern continent. The northern continent doesn't have many resources, and the environment is harsh. Why would the company start a war there? Lin Zheng asked on the special plane of the diplomatic mission to the northern continent. To make money, they want to make the northern countries hostile to each other and make everyone feel insecure. It would be best if they could start an arms race. Then they can sell the obsolete extraordinary training technology to them. The person who answered the question was Qin Yang, who used to be Liu Qiushan's deputy. After Liu Qiushan's death, the rectification agreement disappeared. After being idle for a while, he took the initiative to apply to participate in this mediation activity. In fact, it is better to just sell obsolete technology. Some companies will hide mines in the technology, such as it will definitely get out of control after a certain period of time. Forget about after-sales service. Either the entire technology is disabled, or you spend a lot of money to buy countermeasures. Lin Zheng flipped through the thick stack of information and sighed, the world has become like this, but they still have the mind to play this game. Are you talking about those companies in the Western Federation? Of course they care about the world and humanity, but to them, people from the northern continent are not humans, they are monkeys. Another person next to him suddenly spoke up. Lin Zheng looked up at the person who was speaking. He was a girl in her 20s, extraordinarily beautiful, with pure eyes and eyebrows, fair skin and delicate features without a single flaw. I have just read his information. His name is Liu Jian. He is a member of the Cleaner Team, the official superhuman team of Dongzhou. It is said that this team is best at dealing with large-scale incidents and clustered enemies. This girl named Liu Jian looks like she has the temperament of an idol drama heroine from the inside out, but the photo on her profile is completely different from the real person. In the photo on the profile, her face was covered with decayed scars, her lips were missing, and her teeth were exposed, making her look like a highly decomposed corpse. The externalization rate of 50% is already an extremely high value among extraordinary people, and she had just completed bidimensionalization some time ago. Lin Zheng's current externalization rate is about 30%, and he estimates that the war rate should be around 40%. However, using externalization rate to assess combat effectiveness is often not very accurate. I heard that you were the one who dealt with the elephant in Jianglan City. Liu Jian suddenly jumped in front of Lin Zheng, squatted down and looked up at Lin Zheng who was reading a report. Yet. Lin Zheng nodded casually. Actually, I can do it too. Every member of our cleaning team can do it, so it's nothing big. Liu Jian said. Okay Liu Jian, even if we let you go, you can only solve the problem. Do you think you have the ability to hurt the elephant? A burly man walked out of the cargo hold of the plane with another tall and thin man, each carrying a large box in his hand. They are the other two members of the sweeper team. The burly man is the captain of the sweeper team, his name is Reggie. The tall and thin one is another member named Zhu Ming. Here, this is something that the Prism Bureau prepared specifically for you. I don't know if you can use it. Reiki said in a rough voice as he placed the big box heavily on the table and entered a very long password to open it. Inside was a silver cube and several portable needle-free syringes. A new toy. Lei Qi weighed the metal cube and handed it to Lin Zheng, saying, B309, metal slime mold, specially prepared for you. Can't you use mental power to affect matter? You can try it. Lin Zheng held the small piece of metal in his hand and soon realized that the metal seemed to be alive. And this guy seemed to sense that Lin Zheng had discovered it, and it turned into liquid almost instantly wrapping around his entire palm, and then quickly drilled under the skin along the pores. But before it could get in, Lin Zheng used his mental power to pull it out completely, forcing it to float in the air. This life form between metal and liquid surges in the air, looking quite strange. The properties of this guy are somewhat similar to slime mold. It can change its shape at will and has a strong ability to proliferate. Moreover, its core has basic thinking, and you can control its shape, said Leech. Lin Zheng looked at the metal slime mold surging in the air. The next second, it suddenly stopped surging, and its shape suddenly shrank inward and turned into a long sword suspended in the air. You can also use your mental power to tear it apart. The torn part is lifeless and you can use it as a consumable. Anyway, just make sure the core doesn't leave you. While he was speaking, Lin Zheng had actually almost understood the use of this thing. He guided the metal slime mold to wrap around his wrist, and then it slowly solidified and turned into a metal bracelet. Can't this thing be used to produce resources? For example, to produce metals or something? Lin Zheng asked. No, this little thing is not very obedient. You are probably the only one who can fully control it with mental power. Besides, the metal it generates is not stable. Then what are these? Lin Zheng looked at the neatly arranged headless syringes again. This drug can improve mental strength in a short period of time. Its effect lasts about an hour. It is a very precious thing. Lin Zheng picked up one and shook it slightly. From the small window on the side of the syringe, he could see the blue liquid rippling. There is no doubt that this thing is completely worthless to me. But, maybe I can use this as a cover and then show my true strength. Chapter 99. These two are the most important props, and here are some other things. Zhu Ming also walked forward. The thin-looking man struggled to put another box on the table. He opened the box, and inside it was another pile of miscellaneous things. This pistol is an experimental magic weapon we developed ourselves, called Grey Snake. The bullets it fires carry a complex neurotoxin. Basically, anyone who gets in contact with it will die, but there's a small chance it will fail. This is a protective suit made of the cortex of extraordinary creatures. It has a certain anti-thaumaturgy effect and is a good defense against mysterious magic and magical weapons. There are many religions in the northern continent, and the beliefs are also very strange. The frequency of magic distortion there is also relatively high. As for this necklace, I made it. Zhu Ming picked up a wolf head necklace and said, I call it the Demon Hunter Badge. It will vibrate as long as it senses the presence of distorted magic. Oh, there's this. Zhu Ming opened the compartment of the box, and inside was, half an arm, a human arm, sealed with a thick layer of white wax. This is the arm of a person who holds a magic weapon. The name of the magic weapon is Orc's Fang. It was obtained from a criminal. You can use it as well. How do I use this? Lin Zheng felt a little sick looking at the hand wrapped in white wax. It's very simple. Cut off your hand and sew this arm on. Then you can summon the Orc Fang. But you have to take good care of it in the first few days, otherwise it will rot easily. As for your own hand, I can keep it for you for a while if you want. Lin Zheng clearly felt a nerve on his forehead jump violently. Is there no other way? A way without cutting off my hands? Oh, of course there is, and it's even simpler. I just make a window in your skin and sew the hand in. It depends on which position you prefer, the chest, abdomen or thigh. Wait, let's forget about this. Lin Zheng said quickly. Oh, by the way, I have something for you too. Liu Jian suddenly came over and grabbed Lin Zheng's arm, then casually stuffed it under the hem of his clothes. Lin Zheng was shocked at first, but when he saw that Lei Qi and Zhu Ming had no reaction, he acquiesced in the end. His palm was pressed against the deer's pale, tender and delicate skin. Although the touch was good, it made Lin Zheng frown slightly. Because, it's so good that it's not human anymore. The next moment, a sharp pain suddenly came from the palm of his hand. He subconsciously pulled his hand back, but his palm was clean and empty, as if everything just now was just an illusion. Liu Jian looked at him with a mysterious smile on her face. Then Lin Zheng heard her voice, "Welcome to my local area network." But she didn't speak, but a voice sounded in Lin Zheng's body. This way you will be able to recognize any form of mine. Liu Jian continued. By the way, this phone is also for you. With it, you can mobilize all our resources in the northern continent. Lei Qi took out another silver phone and handed it to Lin Zheng. Lin Zheng looked at the pile of messy things on the table and couldn't help feeling a little emotional. It seems that the Prism Bureau is really worried about its own death, so it has taken out all the best stuff it can use. In addition to these personal equipment, there are many large equipment in the back of their warehouse, and even accessories for a 10-meter class golem. This is a particularly typical mysterious side of extraordinary technology, and it is also specially equipped with 2 cores, war and healing. Mr. Lin, please equip yourself with your personal equipment first. After that, the 3 of us will explain the extraordinary characteristics. There will also be some suggestions for your personal safety later. Your process is quite complicated. But despite his complaints, Lin Zheng still finished assembling all the necessary equipment. When changing his clothes, he even checked his arms and found nothing unusual. You really don't want this hand? Zhu Ming came over with his hand. This one is really useful. It's much more useful than your own. Lin Zheng glared at him and said, You haven't used my hand before, how do you know it doesn't work? Ah, does yours work as well? Then you try this one and I'll try yours, or we can swap. Although my hands are not original, they are also carefully selected and the experience of using them is very good. They seem to be talking about something very strange. Liu Jian said as he sat on a large supply box and swung his legs happily. Well, we all agree that Zhu Ming is a pervert. We just hope he doesn't affect Mr. Lin's mood. Lei Qi sighed softly. But at this moment, the plane shook suddenly. Although it was only for a moment, it made the originally relaxed atmosphere in the cabin suddenly become tense. Reich took the intercom off the wall and said, Captain reporting a malfunction. All aircraft systems are normal and the cause of the turbulence is being investigated. I'll go out and take a look, said Reggie. When he said this, Lin Zheng felt as if they were taking a bus instead of a plane. Okay, don't go out. It's windy outside. Let me do it. Lin Zheng closed his eyes, and his spiritual realm quickly expanded, enveloping the entire plane and spreading to the airspace outside the plane. The overall appearance of the plane appeared in Lin Zheng's mind. This black special plane, which was only half the size of an ordinary passenger plane, was still flying steadily in the sky at this moment, without any damage or attack. But, is there a halo? Lin Zheng noticed 5 or 6 blue halos surrounding the fuselage. There are 3 around the front of the cockpit, on the wings on both sides, around the fuselage, and 1 around the tail. Lin Zheng's mind moved, and he projected what he saw directly to the cleaning team. Do you know him? Lin Zheng asked. I don't know him, but it doesn't look like a good sign. Reich frowned slightly, and he spoke into the intercom again, don't continue flying, find a place to land. Received, preparing to land. Before he could finish his words, the special plane suddenly disintegrated along the lines divided by the blue halo. The fragments did not fall to the ground, but disappeared into the air with a dazzling blue light. Chapter 100. Lin Zheng did not lose consciousness. After all, his essential reality was distorted, so it was impossible for him to lose consciousness. He was merely dead, but that was a minor point. Despite this, Lin Zheng still sighed silently in his heart. He, the direct victim of the visitor, a guy who was watched and respected by the whole world, actually fell to death like this. Well, it's still a bit too absurd anyway. He checked his body and found that he had multiple fractures. A huge piece of metal debris had pierced his heart. His body no longer responded to any nerve commands. It really looks like it is completely dead. I don't know what happened to the other members of the cleaning team, but from the perspective of the extraordinary people, they should not be as fragile as me. Lin Zheng sighed silently. Fortunately, even if this entity died, it could still provide him with an observation position, allowing him to understand the surrounding situation. He began to spread around, quickly observing the surrounding environment, and soon found himself in a completely enclosed environment, which seemed to be some kind of bunker-like building. The surface layer is a metal plate, and behind the metal plate is a thick reinforced concrete structure layer with a thickness of more than 70 centimeters. Behind it is a thick layer of soil. And then, there was no oxygen, not a trace of oxygen. There were several huge ventilation valves at the top of the building, and it was obvious that all the oxygen was being sucked out of there. This was obviously a trap, designed specifically to hunt them. But how did they do this? How could they be transferred from the airspace to the closed ground in an instant? After much thought, there is only one possibility: transmission technology, and it is an extremely perfect transmission technology. Then another question arises. Why is there such advanced teleportation technology in the northern continent, even advanced enough to be used as a weapon? Found a village deep in the mountains and forests? Then the villagers shared their teleportation technology with you? Just as Lin Zheng was puzzled, the ventilation valve on the top of the building slowly opened, and fresh air began to flow into this enclosed space. About 10 minutes later, the ventilation valve stopped operating, and the only heavy metal door in the enclosed space slowly opened, and dozens of fully armed mercenaries poured in. Equipped with uniform military equipment and assault rifles, they rushed in to form a semi-encirclement structure, raising their guns and aiming at Lin Zheng's body. Shoot! The leader gave the order coldly. As soon as the words fell, the empty enclosed space was immediately echoed with deafening gunshots. The rain of bullets shattered Lin Zheng's body into pieces within seconds. The opponent was very powerful, and the arrangements from capture to encirclement and killing were very thorough. They most likely considered the possibility that they had summoned visitors, so after capturing themselves, they chose to use a lethal environment as a means of hunting. It's just that I died faster than they expected. Lin Zheng thought of the 3 people in the sweeper team again. Although all 3 of them were powerful transcendents, he was still a little worried. Lin Zheng looked at himself in pieces and thought, why not just summon war? Just as he was thinking, the gunfire gradually subsided. Everyone had used up all their bullets. The leader took out a walkie-talkie from his waist and said, confirmed that the target is dead. Is he dead? A clear and pleasant voice came from the other end of the intercom. The voice was not in Esperanto, but in Dongzhou dialect. Yes, it has been confirmed that he is completely dead. The team leader replied. Go check again. Is he really dead? Make sure. The leader sighed silently, walked forward, pulled out the pistol from his waist, pointed it at Lin Zheng's head and pulled the trigger. After 2 gunshots, he replied, I'm absolutely sure he couldn't be deader. There was silence on the other end of the intercom. After a moment, there was the sound of brisk footsteps approaching, and a figure appeared outside the steel gate. She was wearing a white shirt, a white skirt, and had clean features. She was extraordinarily beautiful. Dear Shallow. Lin Zheng had been planning to call for war, but at this moment he suddenly stopped, he was even a little speechless. So was this actually a mutiny? Did Liu Jian betray the entire cleaner team? Or did the cleaner team betray the Prism Bureau? No, neither of these is possible. The sweeper team is Deng Zhou's official super team, and the possibility of them betraying is very small. Moreover, the Prism Bureau undoubtedly knew the importance of this operation and would never send a team with the possibility of rebellion to escort himself. There's teleportation technology and teammate betrayal, this is obviously not something that ordinary mercenaries or corporate forces can do. The development of the situation began to be somewhat unexpected. Thinking of this, Lin Zheng suddenly gave up the idea of calling for war. After all, if all 3 members of the sweeper team betrayed us, the chances of winning would not be great even if war was summoned. After all, in addition to the 3 top extraordinary people in the sweeper team, this underground facility also has an entire army, and there may be even stronger extraordinary people besides them. Of course, it is possible to directly summon the visitors, but using the power of the visitors to deal with them is a bit of a waste of resources, and it may also alert the enemy. After all, his mission this time was not to deal with these mercenaries. Let's wait and see. Lin Zheng finally made a decision. Then he saw Liu Jian cautiously approaching his body, and after confirming that he was dead, a happy smile appeared on his face. He's really dead, it's not a big deal. She hummed a tune happily, then suddenly rode on Lin Zheng's body and began to unbutton her shirt, revealing large areas of smooth and delicate skin. Lin Zheng was just shocked, incomparably shocked. Is this woman a necrophiliac? But then something even more shocking happened to Lin Zheng. Her body began to crack, with a crack appearing from her chest to her abdomen. But no blood flowed out. Instead, countless worms as thick as thumbs slowly crawled out, tumbling and wriggling in the air. No, it's not that this woman is breeding these worms inside her body, it's that she's not human at all. Her human form is nothing more than a mimicry made up of countless worms. Then, the woman leaned over and hugged Lin Zheng's body tightly. Her human form began to disintegrate, and more worms began to differentiate. They crawled and coiled around Lin Zheng's body, drilled into his body, wrapped up the entire body, and then slowly gathered into a human form again. It turned back into Liu Jian, but she became a little taller. She curled up on the ground with a lingering look, as if she was enjoying some kind of pleasure. The mercenaries behind her were pale and terrified, and some were even about to vomit. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you're notified of future uploads. You can find the next parts in the playlist visible on the screen or on my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.